Hi everyone, if you enjoyed this video please subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to see you join me. And don't forget to like and let me know what you think in the comments. The road trip from Arizona to Oregon was exactly what I needed. A chance to escape the heartache of a recent breakup. I'm Alex, by the way, and solo RV adventures are usually my thing, or, well, they were until now. See, I'm a sucker for solitude, wide open skies, the rustling whispers of ancient forests, the rhythmic lapping of waves against a deserted lakeshore. That's my kind of therapy. So, when I stumbled upon a weathered turnoff along a winding highway near Crater Lake National Park, it felt like destiny. A small, hand-carved sign pointed down a bumpy dirt track, promising a secluded campsite. Perfect. The first night was pure bliss. I hiked to a quiet overlook, whipped up some campfire grub, and drifted off to sleep under a blanket of twinkling stars. The chirping crickets my lullaby. I even felt that familiar thrill of exploration bubble up inside me the next morning as I set off through the towering pines. Thick mossy trunks stretched as far as the eye could see. Then, I spotted the cabin nestled in a small clearing. It was old and weather-beaten, the kind of place you see in photos of forgotten mining towns. A shiver snaked its way down my spine. Someone was clearly squatting there. My adventurous spirit wavered. Should I turn back? But curiosity, mixed with a stubborn refusal to be chased off by some rundown shack, won out. I approached cautiously, hollering out to announce myself. Silence hung heavy in the air. The inside was just what you'd expect, dusty and bare bones, a single cot, a rickety table. But it was the oddball collection of stuff on a shelf that made my skin crawl. Crude drawings of twisted, deformed animals. Dozens of feathers tied together with twine. And the worst part, a jar filled with murky liquid and what looked disturbingly like tiny animal teeth. I had to get out of there. I was backing toward the door when I heard it. A soft thud behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. Standing in the doorway was a man. Tall and gaunt, with a wild tangle of beard and long, matted hair that half hid his face. But it was his eyes that grabbed me, pale, almost colorless, and gleaming with an unsettling intensity. Well, now, what do we have here? His voice was a low rasp, barely a whisper, but it sliced through the silence like glass shattering. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. Ain't seen a visitor like you in a long time. Come to explore, did you? I shuffled backward, my eyes scanning the room for a weapon, anything. A low chuckle rumbled from him, like it was some kind of private joke. Something catch your eye, did it? He jerked his head vaguely toward the shelf. I risked a nod. My voice finally finding its way out, though it was cracked and unsteady. What is this place? His thin lips stretched into a smile that sent chills down my spine. My sanctuary, he whispered. A place where I can be myself. The air in the cabin suddenly felt thick, suffocating. I think I should go, I managed. He took another step closer, his eyes locked on mine. No need to be hasty. See, this here is my territory. These woods, they're mine. The truth slammed into me like a punch to the gut. The drawings, the feathers, the teeth. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't some squatter's camp. It was his hunting ground, and I was the prey. Panic flooded me. I lunged for the door handle, but he was too quick. His grip on my wrist was like a steel trap. I struggled, kicking out blindly, but his strength was surprising. He yanked me toward the cot, his breath hot on my neck, smelling of damp earth and something sore and metallic. "Struggle all you like," he hissed. "Makes it all the sweeter." Then, a spark of desperation ignited a plan in my mind. My hand fumbled in my pocket, closing around the handle of the pocket knife I always carried, more out of habit than anything else. He threw me onto the cot, his weight pinning me down, the madness in his eyes blazing. I whipped out the knife, flicking it open with a desperate twist. His eyes widened in surprise for just a split second. Then, I plunged the blade upward, aiming for his shoulder. He roared in pain, his grip loosening just enough for me to scramble out from under him. The knife was still clutched in my shaking hand. He stumbled back, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his eyes narrowed with rage. He lunged at me again, a guttural snarl ripping from his throat. I lashed out with the knife, barely managing to deflect his swinging arm. The blade grazed his ribs, drawing a thin line of blood, but it only seemed to make him angrier. We wrestled on the dusty cabin floor, his injured shoulder doing little to slow him down. His eyes burned with a primal fury. Just as his hand closed around my throat, I spotted a heavy looking rock next to the cot. Desperation gave me a surge of adrenaline. I grabbed the rock and swung, feeling the sickening thud as it connected with his skull. He crumpled to the ground with a soft groan. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought I'd killed him. But then, his eyes fluttered open, dazed and unfocused. My pulse pounded in my ears. I had to get out of there. I staggered to my feet, casting a horrified glance back at his still form. My legs carried me out of the cabin and into the woods without a second thought. I ran blindly, branches whipping at my face, the frantic pounding of my heart echoing the screams in my head. I had to get to my RV, get as far away from this place as possible. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon when I finally stumbled back onto the dirt road. My breath hitched in my lungs, each gasp burning like fire. My RV was parked just down the track, a beacon of safety and sanity. I burst through the door, slamming it shut behind me, fumbling with the locks. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the keys in the ignition. Finally, the engine roared to life. I gunned it down the road, my headlights slicing through the deepening twilight. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him charging out of the trees. But there was nothing, just the twisting road disappearing behind me. I drove all night, stopping only for gas and coffee. Fear was my fuel. Every creak of the RV, every rustle of leaves, sending shivers down my spine. He was out there, I was sure of it, waiting, watching. What if he had a car? What if he was following me right now? When dawn finally broke, I pulled into a crowded rest stop. People milled about, going about their normal lives. It was a strange comfort after the horrors of the previous day. I forced myself to go inside, splash some cold water on my face. My reflection stared back at me, eyes haunted and smudged with dirt and exhaustion. I stood there for a long time, the dripping faucet the only sound breaking the silence. I had to call the cops, tell them what happened in the woods. But what would I say? That I stabbed some crazy recluse in self-defense? Would they believe me? And what if he wasn't dead? What if he came looking for revenge? The fear clawed at me. No, I couldn't call the cops, not yet. What I needed was distance, to disappear for a while, lie low until I figured out what to do. I grabbed a bottle of water and a sad-looking pastry from the display rack, paid cash, and slipped back out to my RV. As I drove, the news crackled on the radio, mindless chatter filling the silence. Then, my blood ran cold. A story from Oregon. A body discovered in a remote cabin near Crater Lake, the apparent victim of foul play. The description sent a shiver down my spine. A tall, gaunt, long beard. They hadn't found my knife on him, had they? Would they trace it back to me somehow, slap a suspect label on my forehead? I switched off the radio, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. The open road no longer felt like freedom, it felt like a trap. Each state line I crossed was another noose tightening around my neck. I couldn't drive forever. Eventually, I'd have to stop to sleep, and he'd be there, that wild-eyed specter from the woods, waiting to finish what he started. Or worse, the cops would catch up to me. And then how would I explain it all? The aftermath of my escape is just as terrifying as the encounter itself. I'm a fugitive now. A haunted man with a dark secret, the lingering fear of those pale, empty eyes burning into my soul. My life as an accountant was adventurous, believe it or not. I'm Alex, and a couple of years ago, I bought my RV, which I affectionately call Wanderlust. I ditched my desk job and hit the road. It was the only way to escape the soul-crushing world of numbers. Oh, spreadsheet silence, how I craved you. One day, I found myself tucked away in the remote wilderness of Washington state. I was a bit further out than usual. I typically try to stay within a few miles of civilization, just in case. But the views, man, they were worth it. Towering trees, so grand and ancient, made me feel wonderfully insignificant. A welcome change from the usual clutter in my mind. There was this clearing with a little stream running through it, the perfect spot to park Wanderlust. My first day, as always, was about setting up camp, unpacking chairs, finding a good log to sit on, and enjoying my celebratory drink. A few shots of bourbon this time. As the shadows grew longer, though, I noticed something was off. Not a strange sound or anything definite, just a prickly feeling on the back of my neck. I brushed it off as nerves, probably from being out here further than usual. The next morning, my hike was invigorating. I found a sweet little waterfall and even did some sketching. I'm no artist, but it's a nice way to relax. By the time I got back, it was around dusk. I settled in with a can of beans for dinner and noticed, dang it, my camp chair was gone. Just gone. I searched high and low, thinking maybe I'd spaced out and brought it along on the hike, but no luck. Was my mind already playing tricks on me? Things took a weird turn the following day. I woke up to rustling outside the RV. I jumped to a window and saw a figure hunched over my campfire. Just a glimpse before they vanished back into the trees. I hesitated, unsure what to do. Was it a hiker passing through, or someone who knew I was out here alone? I couldn't shake the feeling, so I decided to play it safe. I quickly packed up my stuff, fired up Wanderlust, and moved down the road about 5 miles. I found a new, less isolated spot, figuring if it was just a passerby, they wouldn't follow. Now, I'd normally be annoyed to change my plans, but honestly, I was a little relieved to be someplace more open. The new spot had a breathtaking view of the valley, and I decided to set up a hammock between 2 trees to do some reading. That's when things got really strange. Mid-afternoon, as I was swaying back and forth, I heard what sounded like footsteps crunching through leaves below. I froze and slowly peered over the edge of the hammock. Someone had taken my camp chair again. It was propped up against the tree, plain as day. I'm not a superstitious guy, but something about this felt seriously wrong. I started thinking about how isolated I was up here, and it gave me the creeps. Remember, this is Alex, the accountant, talking. I don't exactly have the physique to face off against anyone, especially this far out in the wilderness. My only plan was to drive. So, I swung myself out of the hammock, dashed to the RV, tossed my backpack inside, and took off. I kept a nervous eye on the rearview mirror the whole way. I had to get somewhere populated. Some small town, a ranger station, anything. The problem was, the further I drove, the narrower the roads became, and the deeper I went into the woods. After about an hour, the signal on my cell phone died completely. No service bars, nothing. I started getting worried, but I figured the best bet was to keep going, find someone, get help, and sort this thing out. That's when the worst happened. Up ahead, a tree had fallen right across the road. A thick trunk, tangled branches. No way I was getting Wanderlust through. What else could I do? I whipped the RV around and headed back the way I'd come. I was practically holding my breath, waiting for something to come tearing out of those woods. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch made me jump. I drove like my life depended on it, and eventually I found a wider road than a highway. It felt like hours before I found a gas station. The sight of other people, a mini-mart stocked with junk food, felt like coming back from the dead. With shaky hands, I fumbled to refill Wanderlust's tank and finally let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Now, here's the thing. There are people out there in the woods, sure. Some live off the grid, others may stumble into remote spots. But finding my chair twice in two secluded locations miles apart, with no sign of anyone. Let's just say I'm not the type who believes in coincidences. The moment Wanderlust was topped off, I took off again. I booked a motel in the nearest town, a place with a chain restaurant next door and a whole lot of bright lights. Once safe in that generic little room, I called the police. They were nice, but what could they do? Remote location, no proof of anything. Just my word that some weirdo was maybe possibly messing with me. They took a report, said they'd keep an eye out, but I knew nothing would come of it. I didn't head back to that campsite, I couldn't do it. Instead, I decided to push my trip further south. Warmer temperatures, fewer damn trees, that sounded pretty good right now. It's been a week since then, and I haven't seen my camp chair again. I mean, who knows what kind of sick game this is? Maybe someone was watching me out there. Figured they could creep me out enough that I'd leave the area. Maybe it worked. Either way, I'm starting to wonder if I haven't traded crunching numbers in a cubicle for a new kind of madness. All alone on the road. And whoever was out there in the woods, well, I keep catching glimpses of my own shadow, imagining it's someone else. I double-check the locks on Wanderlust every night, jump at any sound. It's got me twisted in knots. The other day, I was driving and passed a hitchhiker, a young guy, scruffy, with a sign that just said, West. Part of me wanted to pull over, to have another person nearby, but I didn't. I just drove past, couldn't bring myself to risk it. What if he was connected to the person in the woods? That thought sent ice down my spine. Maybe he was waiting on the side of the road for me, for his partner to bring me to him, And who knows how many others there could be. They could be anywhere. I could be driving straight into a trap. The paranoia only got worse from there. It felt like eyes were on me everywhere. I'd pull into a gas station and imagine the cashier had a glint in their eye, like they knew my secret. I kept the curtains on Wanderlust drawn, and every night I woke up in a cold sweat, heart pounding. Had I heard something? Had someone moved outside? This wore me down. Within a few days, I was a mess. Forget sleeping, every meal was choked down. Driving, that's all I seemed to do. No destination, no plans. Just running from what though, from whom? I started to doubt myself. Had I imagined it all? Maybe those woods just got into my head. But if the chair thing was real, well, who could be capable of something like that? It was a question I didn't like. I knew the type of guy who could pull that off. I've processed enough spreadsheets in my time to know the criminal mind a bit. Those guys, they operate on a whole different level. You think you can predict their moves, but they're just unpredictable. They enjoy the game, messing with people. And what better game than some lone traveler out on the road, a perfect target? That's when it hit me. That's why I felt uneasy about Wanderlust. The RV was like a giant label saying, "Tourist, alone here." I had to get rid of it, but how? I couldn't exactly sell a vehicle without paperwork. And the police would want to know more than what I was comfortable sharing. I needed to think. Then a billboard caught my eye. Rusty's Junkyard, we buy anything cash paid. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. I headed toward the address, hoping Rusty wasn't too discerning about vehicle conditions. The junkyard was out in the middle of nowhere, stacks of crushed cars, the smell of rust and gasoline hanging heavy in the air. A guy poked his head out of a trailer marked "Office." Greasy overalls, tattoos crawling up his neck. I swallowed hard. Turns out, Rusty couldn't care less about Wanderlust's condition. He tossed me a few crisp bills and had one of his guys hook her up and drag her off. There was a flicker of guilt as I watched her go. My home for the past few years, but it faded quickly. I was on the road to the Florida Keys, or at least that was the plan. Figured all those tourists would drown out whatever paranoia still lingered after that whole mess up in Washington. Plus, beaches, margaritas, that had to help clear my name, right? I'm Ethan, by the way. To anyone who knew me, but right now, that's nobody. Just another drifter, blending in. Those first few days were rough. Every creak of my RV, every shadow that looked a little too human. It set me on edge. Didn't help that my internet searches basically said there's a messed up, elusive hermit type living in just about every remote patch of woods nationwide. Just my luck, I ran into one by the time I hit Tennessee. But then things started to look up. Found myself a sweet little campground perched right above a river. A whole community of RVs there. I made some friends, well, acquaintances mostly, folks passing through. But it felt good to talk to another living person for more than 2 minutes at a gas station. There was this one couple, Clara and George, who seemed likely to stick around longer. They had a vintage Airstream, all tricked out. Said they did the full-time snowbird thing between Tennessee and Florida. Clara was the type of woman whose laugh filled the whole campground. Bright pink nails, always done, never a hair out of place. George was quieter, weathered face. Hands that looked like they could build a house from scratch. They invited me over for drinks one night. Turns out George was a retired detective from Atlanta. We sat on our fold-out chairs under the awning of their trailer, listening to crickets hum louder and louder as the sky got dark. I found myself, well, maybe confession is too strong a word, but I told them a bit about my trip. A sanitized version of events. George didn't say much, just nodded along. Then Clara, bless her big heart, says, "Goodness, sounds like you need to learn how to protect yourself." At first I balked. I'm a pacifist, always have been. But George, he didn't laugh or dismiss it. Just said, matter-of-factly, that some situations call for defense. And me being a sitting duck in my RV was a recipe for trouble. He offered to give me a few lessons in the morning. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe some basic karate moves. Turns out, George's version of self-defense was more about situational awareness. Being alert to your surroundings, knowing when something's just off. He walked me around the campsite, pointing out escape routes, places where someone could hide. Later, he taught me some tactical stuff about using a flashlight, even just common objects as makeshift weapons, if need be. It felt empowering, in a way. I wouldn't say it erased the fear, but it put a tool belt around it, you know. Like before, it was just this looming dread, and now it became something I could strategize against. A few days later, I was ready to roll out, but Clara pulled me aside. Honey, take this," she said, pressing a small canister into my hand. "Pepper spray. Keep it on you, and don't be afraid to use it." She gave me a hug, like one of her own grandkids, and I almost teared up. Those two, they reminded me there was good out there too. I was driving through Louisiana when it happened. Not some big encounter, nothing like that. Just a prickling on my neck, that same damn feeling I had way back in the woods. I glanced at the clock, 3 a.m. Why the hell was I driving in the middle of the night? I started to slow down, scanning for a rest stop. That's when I saw it. An old pickup truck, parked on a patch of dirt just off the shoulder ahead. No lights on, but the shape was unmistakable. The same kind I'd glimpsed when carrying my camp chair. My pulse kicked up hard. Now, I could have gunned it, tried to put distance between us. But some stubborn part of me wanted to know for sure. I crept past, pulled the RV over a good 100 yards up the road, and cut the engine. Everything was silent. I grabbed the heavy flashlight George had recommended and the pepper spray. Then, I crept back. The pickup was empty. No sign of anyone around, but the driver's side door was open. A crumpled beer can on the ground beside it. Slowly, I edged closer. The headlights flickered on, blinding me. I staggered back, throwing up an arm to shield myself. A figure emerged from the darkness. Tall, scruffy looking. My heart hammered in my ears. I fumbled for the pepper spray, my fingers clumsy. That's when I recognized him. Not the face, but the build, the way he held himself. It was George. Relief flooded through me, but then, what the hell was he doing here? George looked right at me, and in a flash, I understood. That story about him being a retired detective, it was all a lie. A setup. And I'd taken the bait. A grin slowly spread across George's face. It wasn't a friendly grin. Everything clicked into place. The way he'd steered me towards self-defense, the too convenient timing of my lucky break. Finding them in that Tennessee campground. Clara with the pepper spray, a final prop to play the concerned couple, as I was delivered into the trap. "What do you want?" My voice came out as a choked rasp, George's grin widened. Well, let's just say you've got something we need. He took a step closer. Panic surged through me. I had the pepper spray, but fumbling with it now would be useless. My mind raced. George had a gun, no doubt about it. Running was pointless. He'd pick me off before I made it to the RV. My only chance was to close the distance, neutralize his weapon somehow. Before I could formulate a plan, a voice cut through the night. Hold it right there. Light flashed in my eyes. A second figure emerged from the darkness. For a wild second, I thought it was backup. Maybe Clara had come to her senses. But no, this figure was leaner, younger, and the gun in his hand was pointed unwaveringly at George. You want trouble, old man? Let him go, the stranger said. He sounded tough, but a hint of nervousness in the voice said he was young, probably around my age. George was frozen, then he glanced from me to the stranger. A flicker of calculation crossed his features. This doesn't concern you, he snarled at the newcomer. Made it my concern, the stranger snapped. I need a ride. See that RV? He's giving it to me now. Common sense would say run, join forces with the other guy. But something in the air felt wrong. The desperation in this newcomer's voice, the way he'd appeared out of nowhere. What if they were in on it together? George looked like he was weighing his options. I held my breath. Then, with a speed that belied his age, George lunged for me. That's when I made my move. I didn't even think, just reacted. George reached for my throat, and I slammed the heavy flashlight into the side of his head with every ounce of strength I had. I felt rather than heard something crack. He stumbled back, cursing, one hand raised to his temple. The newcomer didn't hesitate. He charged in, tackled George. They crashed to the ground, wrestling. Gunshots rang out, deafening. My ears buzzed, the smell of gunpowder filled the air. Somehow, I turned and ran, stumbling, gasping. I made it to my RV. I clawed my way inside, slammed the door, and locked it. I crouched there for what felt like an eternity. The only sound was the frantic drumming of my own heart. When I dared to peek out a window, the scene by the roadside was chaos. Headlights flickered erratically. A car approaching, the cops. My eyes settled on a figure scrambling out from under George's truck. The newcomer. He dashed off into the darkness, vanishing into the thick brush edging the road. A wave of nausea washed over me. I hadn't meant to. George. He might be dead. I closed my eyes, then forced myself to look again. Figures were approaching, drawn by the gunshots. Locals, probably. I had to get out of here. Hands shaking, I started the RV, swung it onto the road, and hit the gas. My campsite keys, were they on George's body? In his truck? Clara? Would she be targeted next? These questions spun through my head, a nauseating litany. I had to get somewhere safe, call the police. But how could I explain that I'd been set up, played like a pawn in some backwoods game? I couldn't fathom. I drove through the night, not stopping until dawn tinged the horizon. I found a nondescript diner and sat in a booth, staring at the menu but seeing nothing. What the hell had I gotten myself into? That campground, Clara and George, were they all part of this? Was there some network of grifters, or worse, preying on unsuspecting travelers? I shuddered. In my rearview mirror, the road stretched back, a long, empty ribbon. It felt like I was driving away from one nightmare straight into another. And out there, someone who wanted my RV badly enough to kill was still on the loose. I'm Becca, and I've been on the road for about a year now, after selling my place back in California, chasing that whole van life vibe before it was like every influencer's Insta feed, you know. Turns out, finding a good boondocking spot is a skill. You gotta look for level ground, check for hidden dips, that sort of thing. You also want to be far enough off the highway for privacy, but not so far in that you're totally cut off from the world if you need help or something. See us Arvas talk. There are forums, apps, the whole deal. We share good locations with each other. That's the whole secret. So, when I rolled into that little Wyoming town, Dusty Creek, I think it was called, it wasn't on a whim. I'd heard there was a sweet spot just off the interstate, tucked near a river bend. Everything I needed for a few days of chill. Only, when I got to the GPS coordinates, there was someone else parked there. A beat up old Winnebago. The kind you see in movies when someone's running from the law. Something felt off. I'll admit, I'm more the yoga and smoothies type than the prepper type. But I decided to trust my gut. Besides, anyone who boondocks regularly has that extra propane tank, the backup water jug. It wasn't like I was in real danger, right? Just needed to find another spot. The sun was starting to dip when I found one a few miles further down a dirt road. It wasn't as good. A little sloped, more scrubby bushes around instead of trees. But it'd do. I settled in, made some dinner, the whole deal. Night fell, and it was pitch dark. The kind of quiet you don't get in the city. That's when I heard it. Footstep, slow, crunching footsteps, circling my RV. My heart hammered against my ribs. What the hell did I do? This wasn't some random animal. If I turned on the lights, they'd know I was in here. But if I didn't, my hand fumbled for my phone. No signal, of course. Think, Becca, think. Then it hit me. The solar panel on the roof. It had a little Bluetooth connector for diagnostics. I could use it to play music. Load. Some obnoxious party anthem that would hopefully scare off whatever was out there. I connected, blasted the volume. The footsteps stopped, then moved away faster, fading into the bushes. Relief washed over me, mingled with a jolt of adrenaline. Did it work? Was whoever it was gone? I waited, heart pounding. But there was nothing more. Only the wind whispering through the scrub. The next morning, I got out of there as fast as I could. Pulled into a rest stop to check the news. Nothing big in that part of Wyoming that would lead anyone to lurk around someone's camper. Maybe a local teen messing around. Or a drifter. Still, there was no way I was staying out there. A few days later, I was in another campground, one of the crowded kind. Found myself at the communal table, swapping stories like you do. There was an older woman there, Anna, with a kind face and a no-nonsense haircut. She'd been on the road even longer than me, had that seen it all vibe. So, I told her what happened. Not all of it, just enough to ask what she thought. Anna didn't laugh or brush it off. Her gaze narrowed. "You did the right thing," she said. "Some places, they're not right. Something clings to them." She told me about her time working at a national park. The things rangers never put in the brochures. Strange occurrences. Disappearances. She told me about a lone wanderer they suspected of squatting on parkland, always disappearing right when they got close. And how campers started vanishing too. Their rigs found abandoned, no sign of them. I realized who she was talking about. I felt that chill run down my spine. The man from the other campsite. The one with the Winnebago. Anna lowered her voice. You got away. But listen, Becca, the road is a beautiful thing, but it's got teeth too. Share those coordinates online. Warn others. It felt wrong at first, like breaking the RV code of secrecy. But she was right. Now, whenever I find a truly great boondocking spot, I share it, no hesitation. And when I hear about coordinates with some weird vibes, well, let's just say I choose a well-lit rest area instead. No regrets. Some secrets shouldn't be kept. The Ozarks have always been my sanctuary. The rolling hills, the dense forests, the quiet, it all speaks to a part of me that craves solitude and escape. Every September, I pack up my RV and head for my favorite spot, a secluded campsite nestled deep within the Missouri Ozarks. But this year, something feels different, sinister even. It started with an old flip phone, half buried in the dirt near my campsite. I dug it out, curious, but the battery was completely dead. I tossed it aside, thinking nothing more of it. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, a creeping sense of unease settled over me. A branch snapping too loud in the stillness of the forest. A shadow that seemed to linger just a bit too long. A feeling of being watched. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to the isolation and my overactive imagination. But then things started happening that I couldn't explain. The old flip phone kept reappearing. I'd find it on the picnic table, inside my RV, even tucked under my pillow. Each time, the battery was dead, as if it had been drained of all life. This unsettling experience led me to research the history and mysteries of the Ozarks, hoping to find some answers. Then there were the footprints around my campsite, the subtle rearrangement of my supplies, the feeling that someone had been inside my RV while I was away. One evening, I saw a figure duck behind a tree, just out of sight. I called out, but there was no answer. Fear began to gnaw at me. Was I being stalked? But why? I hadn't seen another soul in days. The Ozarks are known for their share of legends and folklore, tales of strange creatures and mysterious happenings. Could this be something supernatural? Or was there a more mundane, and perhaps even more terrifying, explanation? One afternoon, I heard voices close to my RV. I peeked out the window and saw two men talking in hushed tones. They were dressed in camouflage, and one of them had a rifle slung over his shoulder. I ducked down, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my backpack, threw some essentials inside, and slipped out the back of the RV. I followed a set of fresh footprints that led deeper into the woods. After what felt like hours, I stumbled upon a hidden campsite. There was a tent, a campfire, and the two men I had seen earlier. One of them turned and saw me. He raised his rifle and fired a shot that whizzed past my head. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran, the sound of the gunshot echoing through the trees. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest. Finally, I collapsed by a stream, gasping for breath. I had no idea where I was or what to do next. The sun was setting, and the forest was growing dark. I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to find help. I followed the stream, hoping it would lead me to a road or a town. Eventually, I came to a small highway. I flagged down a passing car, and the driver, a kind elderly woman, took me to the nearest town. I checked into a motel, grateful for a bed and a locked door. Now, I'm sitting here in this motel room, trying to make sense of what happened. I'm terrified, confused, and alone. Why was I being stalked? Who were those men? And what did they want? The Ozarks, a vast highland region spanning parts of Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, are known for their rugged beauty and rich history. The area was originally inhabited by Native American tribes, including the Osage and Quapaw. European settlers arrived in the 17th and 18th centuries, drawn by the promise of land and opportunity. The Ozarks played a significant role in American history, serving as a refuge for displaced Native Americans during westward expansion and a place of divided loyalties during the Civil War. Ozark, Missouri, where my campsite was located, was founded in 1841 and named after the nearby Ozark Mountains. After the Civil War, Ozark became a center for agricultural trade, with businesses and industries growing to support local farmers. The Finley River, which flows through Ozark, played a vital role in the town's development, serving as a source of water and a means of transportation. Today, Ozark is known for its friendly atmosphere and thriving economy. Early settlers in the Ozarks relied heavily on hunting, fishing, trapping, and foraging to supplement their diets and incomes. These practices are still common today, both for recreation and as a way to connect with the land. The Ozarks' unique culture and history have contributed to its mystique and allure. The unsettling events I experienced have made me acutely aware of the darker side of the Ozarks. This region, despite its beauty and tranquility, has a history of unsolved mysteries and disappearances. One of the most chilling cases is that of the Springfield Three, where three women, Cheryl Levitt, her daughter Suzanne Streeter, and their friend Stacy McCall, vanished without a trace from Levitt's home in Springfield, Missouri, in 1992. Despite extensive investigations and numerous leads, the case remains open, leaving a haunting question mark over the Ozarks. Another case that has stuck with me is the disappearance of Christine Seal in 1972. Christine, a young mother, vanished from her home in the Ozarks, leaving behind her car, purse, and young son. The investigation was hampered by missing files and a lack of concrete evidence, leaving Christine's fate unknown and her family with unanswered questions. These unsolved mysteries serve as a stark reminder that even in the most idyllic settings, darkness can lurk and danger can strike unexpectedly. My experience in the Ozarks has brought to light the profound psychological effects of isolation and paranoia. Studies have shown that social isolation can lead to anxiety, depression, and even psychosis. The lack of social interaction and the feeling of being cut off from the world can distort perception and amplify fears. In my case, the isolation of the Ozarks, coupled with the strange events I was experiencing, created a breeding ground for paranoia. I began to question my sanity, wondering if I was imagining things or if I was truly in danger. The information presented earlier about the link between isolation and paranoia resonated deeply with me. Studies have shown that social isolation can trigger or worsen existing mental health conditions, including paranoia. The lack of social contact can create a feedback loop, where paranoid thoughts are reinforced in the absence of external input and validation. This isolation-induced paranoia can lead to distorted perceptions, heightened anxiety, and difficulty distinguishing between real and imagined threats. The fear and paranoia I experienced in the Ozarks were overwhelming. I felt vulnerable, exposed, and utterly alone. It's crucial to acknowledge and address these feelings, especially in situations of isolation. Talking to a therapist can provide a safe space to process the experience and develop coping mechanisms. Practicing relaxation techniques, such as deep breathing and meditation, can help calm the mind and reduce anxiety. Staying connected with loved ones, even if it's just through phone calls or messages, can provide a sense of support and reassurance. The encounter with the armed man forced me to confront the reality of my situation. I was alone in the wilderness with no one to help me. I realized the importance of self-defense and survival skills in such a situation. Learning how to build a shelter, find food and water, and navigate in the wilderness could be crucial in a survival situation. While I was fortunate enough to escape, I know that I need to be better prepared in the future. Perhaps even more important than the physical skills is the mental preparedness for survival. As I learned, maintaining a calm center is the #1 wilderness survival priority. Panic can cloud judgment and lead to poor decisions that could jeopardize safety. Staying focused, assessing the situation clearly, and approaching challenges with a positive mental attitude can significantly increase the chances of survival. Now that I'm safe, my next step is to report what happened to the authorities. The Ozarks are primarily under the jurisdiction of local law enforcement agencies, such as the Ozark Police Department and the Christian County Sheriff's Department. In an emergency, dialing 911 is the quickest way to get help. I can also submit a crime tip anonymously to the Ozark Police Department. It's important to provide as much detail as possible when reporting a crime, including the location, time, and description of the suspects. Stalking is a pattern of behavior that causes fear or concern for one's safety. It's crucial to take threats seriously and alert trusted individuals about the situation. Documenting every incident, including phone calls, messages, and encounters, can be helpful in building a case. In my case, the old flip phone could be a key piece of evidence. In the long term, dealing with the trauma of being stalked may require specialized support. Wilderness therapy, which involves outdoor experiences and therapeutic interventions, can be a valuable tool for healing and recovery. It can help individuals process their trauma, develop coping skills, and reconnect with nature in a safe and supportive environment. My trip to the Ozarks this year was a harrowing experience that transformed my understanding of this beautiful but sometimes dangerous region. What started as a peaceful retreat turned into a terrifying ordeal, forcing me to confront my fears and vulnerabilities. I'm still shaken by the events that unfolded, but I'm also grateful to be alive. This experience has taught me the importance of preparedness, self-reliance, and the need to trust my instincts. Learning about the history and folklore of the Ozarks has given me a new perspective on the events. The region's rich past, with its tales of resilience, hardship, and unsolved mysteries, has helped me contextualize my own experience. The research on paranoia has been particularly insightful, shedding light on the psychological effects of isolation and fear. Understanding the link between isolation and paranoia has helped me make sense of my own reactions and seek appropriate support. I'm determined to overcome the fear and paranoia that have plagued me and reclaim my love for the Ozarks. I know that with time, support, and a deeper understanding of myself and the environment around me, I can heal from this trauma and find peace once again. The Superstition Wilderness, a rugged and unforgiving expanse in the heart of the Arizona desert, has long been steeped in folklore and legend. Tales of lost gold mines, vengeful spirits, and strange creatures have been whispered around campfires for generations. But for one solo camper, Mark, these whispers became a terrifying reality. Mark, an experienced outdoorsman with a love for solitude and the stark beauty of the desert, had set up camp near Weaver's Needle, a towering rock formation that cast an eerie shadow over the landscape. As twilight deepened and the stars began to emerge in the inky sky, Mark felt a growing sense of unease. The usual comfort he found in the desert silence was replaced by an unnerving feeling of being watched. A prickling sensation crawled up his spine, and the distant howl of a coyote seemed to echo his own growing anxiety. He tried to dismiss the feeling as an overactive imagination, a side effect of spending too much time alone in the wilderness. But as he settled into his tent, the feeling intensified. Every rustle of leaves, every crackle of the dying embers in his campfire, sent a jolt of fear through him. Sleep became an impossible dream. Then it happened. A blood-curdling scream shattered the night, tearing through the silence like a shard of glass. Mark scrambled out of his tent, heart pounding against his ribs, and fumbled for his flashlight. In the distance, bathed in the pale moonlight, he saw them. A group of figures, tall and skeletal, their forms barely discernible against the dark backdrop of the desert. They moved with an unnatural, jerky gait, their limbs long and thin, their bodies seemingly devoid of flesh. But what truly terrified Mark were their eyes, glowing orbs of eerie luminescence that pierced the darkness. Frozen with fear, Mark watched as the creatures converged on a nearby campsite. He could hear the panicked shouts of the campers, their voices rising in terror as the creatures descended upon them. Then silence, an abrupt and chilling silence that hung heavy in the air, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the cacti. Mark's mind raced. Were these creatures extraterrestrial beings, visitors from another world? Or were they something else entirely, something born of the desert's ancient magic and whispered legends? He remembered the stories of the skinwalkers, shape-shifting creatures said to roam the Navajo Nation lands, and a shiver ran down his spine. He watched in horror as the creatures retreated into the darkness, their glowing eyes fading into the distance like dying embers. Each step they took seemed to defy gravity, their feet barely touching the ground. In their elongated, skeletal fingers, they clutched luminous spheres, pulsating with an otherworldly light. The spheres cast an eerie glow on the creatures' withered forms, revealing glimpses of tawny skin stretched taut over bone. Adrenaline finally surged through Mark's paralyzed limbs. He stumbled back into his tent, his hands shaking as he threw his belongings into his backpack. He didn't stop to think, didn't dare look back. He fled into the night, the image of the creatures seared into his memory, their glowing eyes haunting his every step. He ran until the first rays of dawn painted the sky with hues of orange and purple, until the desert landscape transformed from a menacing shadowland into a familiar, albeit unsettling, reality. Exhausted and terrified, he stumbled upon a lone gas station on a deserted highway. As he recounted his experience to the bewildered attendant, the words tumbling out in a jumbled mess, he realized the enormity of what he had witnessed. Mark's encounter in the superstition wilderness remains a chilling testament to the mysteries that lurk in the unknown. Whether these creatures were extraterrestrial beings, interdimensional travelers, or something else entirely. Their presence in the desolate landscape left an indelible mark on him. His story serves as a cautionary tale for those who venture into the wilderness alone, a reminder that not all creatures are of this world, and some encounters are best left undisturbed. The nature of these beings remains a subject of speculation. Some believe they are extraterrestrial visitors, drawn to the desert's isolation and mysterious energy. Others point to ancient legends and folklore, suggesting they could be skinwalkers, or perhaps some other type of paranormal entity. Whatever their origin, their existence challenges our understanding of the natural world and the boundaries of reality. Mark's experience serves as a stark reminder of the power of fear and the fragility of human perception. It highlights the importance of respecting the wilderness and acknowledging the possibility of the unknown. For in the vast and desolate landscapes of the Arizona desert, where shadows dance and whispers linger, reality itself can become blurred, and the line between the known and the unknown can vanish like a mirage in the shimmering heat. It was right before Labor Day last year, and my buddy Mark and his girlfriend, Sarah, and I decided to hit the Ozarks for the long weekend. I'm Jake, by the way. Always been more of a backpack and beat-up RV kinda guy. Open road suits me better than any house or 9-to-5 grind ever could. Mark, on the other hand, is a total suit and tie workaholic. Lives in a fancy condo, glued to his phone 24/7. Figured dragging him out to the woods might do him some good. Sarah was cool with it, always up for an adventure. We rolled into this campsite Friday evening. It was this little hidden spot off the beaten track, nestled in a valley by a creek. Not a soul around. As the sun started to set, the whole place felt damn peaceful. We pitched our tents, cracked open some beers, and swapped stories around the campfire. You know, classic weekend getaway stuff. But that perfect outdoorsy vibe didn't last long. We started hearing noises that night, snapping branches, rustling leaves. The kind of sounds that make the hairs on your neck stand up. Mark laughed it off at first, said it was just animals, but even he seemed a bit on edge. Sarah, trying to lighten the mood, joked about some furry critter raiding our snacks and started making up these ridiculous names for it, like a raccoon, possum, bear, or something. It helped ease the tension a bit, but I still couldn't shake this feeling that something was watching us. And then I saw it. 2 pinpricks of light, glowing in the darkness just beyond the firelight. I thought it was a deer at first, but then the damn thing blinked. Now, I've seen my share of weird stuff on the road, thought I was immune to the creeps. But those eyes, they were too big, too high off the ground for any normal animal. Panic started to rise in my chest, that flight thing kicking in. I woke Mark and Sarah. Mark swore it was nothing, but Sarah looked terrified, clutching her blanket, even though it was a warm summer night. We threw more wood on the fire, trying to convince ourselves it was just our imaginations playing tricks. But none of us slept much that night. Every snap, every rustle had us on high alert. By sunrise, whatever it was gone. We decided to check things out, looking for tracks. Any sign of what was watching us. That's when we found it, a deer carcass, picked clean to the bone. But this wasn't any coyote or mountain lion kill. The thing was ripped apart, meat torn off with way too much force for any animal I knew. Suddenly, Those campfire stories didn't seem so funny anymore. Things got worse that afternoon. We were following the creek, looking for a fishing spot, when Mark yelped and stumbled back. His fishing line had snagged on something in the water. He pulled it in, and we saw what it was, this mangled, bloody mess. Half of what might have been a beaver or a really big muskrat. Mark turned white as a sheet and threw up in the bushes. Sarah looked like she was about to faint. I'd never seen them so freaked out. That's when we decided, screw fishing, screw this whole weekend. It was time to pack up and get the hell out of there. I tried to keep everyone calm as we scrambled to break down the tents and load the RV. Sarah was practically in tears by the time we were ready to go. We piled into the RV, me trying to hide my own nerves. As we pulled out of the campsite, Mark, with a shaky voice, asked what the hell I thought that thing was. I shrugged because, honestly, I had no clue. Part of me still wanted to say it was all in our heads, but after seeing that carcass, I couldn't lie anymore. Whatever was out there, it was big, it was deadly, and it sure as hell didn't like sharing its territory. We were hauling ass down this deserted highway when Sarah shouted from the back for me to slow down. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding. There it was, darting across the road right in front of us, the damn thing. I got a good look at it this time in the fading twilight. It was massive, shaped like a wolf but taller, its movements unnatural, like its limbs were too long. It turned its head towards us. And those eyes, God, those eyes, they gleamed like fire in the headlights. Mark screamed something I couldn't make out, and I was too paralyzed to even hit the gas. For a heart-stopping moment, it just stood there, watching us, like it was enjoying our fear. Then it slunk across the road and vanished into the trees. My mind scrambled for any logical explanation, anything to make sense of what we just saw. Mark was mumbling nonsense, and Sarah was sobbing in the corner. The RV was shaking so badly from my tremors I thought it might tip over. I had to get us out of there. I forced myself to slam the RV into gear, tires spinning, fishtailing on the deserted road. We were all screaming, me in frustration, them in terror. We sped down the highway, a blur of trees and the occasional deer fleeing from our headlights. About an hour later, we finally saw a sign of civilization, a rundown gas station just off the highway. Pulling in felt like entering a sanctuary. Mark, still in shock, stammered that he needed to use the bathroom. Sarah, face streaked with tears, said she wasn't letting him out of her sight. I told them to go, but they refused to leave me alone in the RV, with that thing lurking out there in the darkness. I grabbed a busted baseball bat from under the driver's seat, pathetic protection, but it was something. While Mark was inside, I heard shouting from the back of the gas station. I took a deep breath and sprinted towards the noise, baseball bat raised, my heart pounding like a drum solo. The scene that greeted me made me freeze in horror. There was a shredded tent, sleeping bags strewn about, an overturned gas can leaking fuel, and a body, a man, judging by his hiking gear, torn to pieces. More blood than I'd ever seen outside a war zone. Sarah and Mark emerged from the station, their faces mirroring my own shock. Mark took one look at the scene, vomited violently at the edge of the parking lot, and then something inside him snapped. He ran back into the gas station, yelling about calling the cops, screaming that it wouldn't do any good, that we were all going to die out here. I told Sarah to stay close and get back in the RV. I slowly circled the carnage, eyes peeled for the creature. Part of me still wasn't convinced this was anything more than some bear attack gone horribly wrong. But that carcass back in the Ozarks, and those damn eyes, something inside me knew this wasn't a bear. As I was casing the scene, a low growl echoed from the woods. My blood ran cold. I whirled around, bat raised, just in time to see the creature emerge from the darkness. It stalked towards me, slow and deliberate, like it knew it had me right where it wanted me. It stepped into the dim lights of the station, and I finally saw it clearly. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall at the shoulder, with wolf-like features twisted into something grotesque. Its fur was mangy and patchy, clinging to raw, pulsating muscles. Its claws were bigger than knives, glinting in the faint light. And those eyes, they burned with the same cruel intelligence I saw on the road. I stood my ground, my scream of defiance more a strangled sob than any sound of intimidation. Sarah was screaming for me from the RV, telling me to run. Mark was shouting something incoherent on the station's phone. The creature lunged faster than anything its size should be able to move. I swung the bat in desperation, landing a heavy blow on its foreleg. It yelped in what almost sounded like surprise, giving me time to scramble away. I heard a gunshot from the gas station. Mark must have found the owner's shotgun. Another shot rang out, then silence. The creature was gone, vanished back into the woods. Injured, probably, but alive. Mark staggered from the gas station, shotgun lowered, eyes wide with a strange mix of fear and manic energy. The aftermath, well, let's just say it involved a hell of a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. Park rangers, police, even some guys in suits who didn't share their names swarmed the gas station. We stuck to our story, something big, something strong, something we couldn't identify except for those terrifying eyes. They didn't buy it, not fully at least. News reports called it a freak animal attack, cautioning hikers, hunters, anyone venturing into the woods. We slipped away amidst the chaos, me driving us back to civilization at a speed that probably should have gotten me arrested. We never spoke much about it after that day. Mark went right back to his fancy corporate life. Sarah started carrying pepper spray on every hike. And me, I sold my RV and haven't been camping since. Sometimes, when I hear a twig snap outside my window at night, I imagine those eyes glowing back at me and wonder if maybe those Ozarks hold secrets best left buried. Maybe that thing was what the old-timers called a skinwalker. I don't know, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. It was a scorcher of a summer up in Maine. Me, Rex, and my 2 bone-headed buddies, Hank and Jed, decided we were gonna conquer Baxter State Park. Now, Jed's your typical, prepared for the apocalypse hiker. Got all the fancy gear, knows how to use a compass, probably eats bugs for fun. Hank's more the beer and a prayer type. And me, I'm usually the one trying to stop these 2 from getting us all killed. So, we get to the trailhead later than we should, like way late. Sun's already starting to dip. But we're stubborn, so we head out anyway. Gotta get those nighttime hiking bragging rights, you know. The air is like soup, and the mosquitoes are the size of small birds. We should have turned back then. Hindsight's 20/20, right? We're trudging along, headlamps on, doing our best to ignore the fact that every rustle in the woods sounds like a bear about to pounce. Then Hank, who's always got his eyes on the ground looking for, I don't even know what, suddenly stops. "Holy crap, guys. You gotta see this," he says, and his voice is kinda shaky. Jed sighs that sigh that means he's already regretting this whole trip. But even he's curious. We crouch down beside Hank, and I shine my light where he's pointing. And that's when we see it. It's a deer. Or what's left of one. It's ripped apart, like something just took a giant chunk out of it. The bones aren't just gnawed, they're splintered, like toothpicks. And the bite marks, they're huge. Way bigger than any bear I've ever seen, and I've hunted these woods my whole life. The smell hits you like a punch in the gut, that raw, coppery smell of blood and something else, something rotten. Suddenly, those monster mosquitoes don't seem so bad. A cold shiver runs down my spine, and I can feel the sweat starting to prickle on my skin. Jed starts rambling on about predators, his voice getting higher with every word. Hank tries to crack a joke about Bigfoot, but it falls flat. Even he sounds scared. All I can think about is how quickly it's getting dark, and how far we are from anywhere. We don't talk about the deer after that, but it's like this dark cloud hanging over us. The whole vibe changes. Hank's practically jogging now, muttering under his breath. Jed keeps looking over his shoulder, his eyes wide and darting around. We finally make it to our campsite around midnight. It's just a small clearing by a stream, nothing special. But after what we saw, just being able to sit down feels like a miracle, even if the ground is harder than concrete. We build a fire. Not because we need it, it's still hotter than hell out, but because it makes us feel a little safer. Even though the flickering shadows just make the woods seem even creepier. And then we hear it. This low growl, coming from just beyond the firelight. It's the kind of growl that makes your blood run cold. Jed freezes. A choked sound coming from his throat. Hank yelps, a high-pitched, terrified sound. I'm fumbling for the hunting knife on my belt, my heart hammering against my ribs. We stare out into the darkness, straining to see anything. But there's nothing there, just that growl. Again and again, like it's circling us. Then, we hear something else, something that makes the first growl seem like a puppy's whimper. It's an answer from further away, then another, and another. A whole chorus of them, echoing through the trees. "Nope, nope, nope," Hank's saying, scrambling for his backpack. "I'm done. I'm out of here." Jed's just standing there, frozen, staring out into the darkness with this blank look on his face. "We can't just run," he says, but his voice is shaking. "We don't even know what's out there." He doesn't get to finish, because that's when it comes charging out of the woods. From there, the story continues as before, with the creature attacking, the chase, the mutilated creature on the road, and the aftermath. The key change here is the more direct and impactful opening, focusing on the discovery of the deer and the immediate sense of dread and fear it instills. I always say a road trip out west is more about the journey than the destination. I mean, come on, the landscape itself is the main event. Zion National Park in southern Utah, with those huge, rusty red canyons and those emerald pools, was on the itinerary this time. My buddy Finn and I have been doing an annual guy's RV trip for a few years now. Beats sleeping in some grubby motel, that's for sure. We picked up the RV in Denver, got our supplies, and hit the road. Finn's a photographer. He's got this whole nature's religion thing going. So any trip turns into a week-long photo shoot for him. But hey, I never leave without at least a few great Instagram shots. We rolled into Springdale, a gateway town to Zion, pretty late on a Monday. This little joint of a campground, called Winchester Pines, looked deserted. Well, except for that behemoth of an RV parked under a scrubby old cottonwood. I'm talking serious luxury rig. Must be nice, dude. Someone's beat us to the best spot. I frowned, looking toward the shadowy RV. Even at this distance, it looked like it belonged to a rock star, not a national park enthusiast. Finn shrugged. It happens. No use sweating it. He parked as far away as we could, his movements quick and purposeful, like always. Finn isn't one to dawdle. Me? I'm a chill guy, but seeing that boogie motor home ruined my zen a bit. Dude, seriously, it looks like an armored car or something. All blacked out, tinted windows. I grumbled. There was just something a little off about the thing. Finn snorted. You're just jealous. Come on, let's get this baby set up. I want a beer. We got the RV squared away in record time. I always leave that stuff to Finn. He gets weirdly obsessive about it. Levels, wiring, all that jazz. I grabbed a couple of cold ones from the fridge and flopped down in one of the outdoor chairs. A few hours in, we were halfway through a poker game when a chill ran down my spine. There's nothing quite like that desert silence at night, but something felt different. My gut churned, and I couldn't shake it. Even Finn had his head up as if sensing something. Hear that? The words barely left my mouth. A scratching echoed through the campground. At first, it seemed faint, distant. Then it grew louder, closer. Finn's grip tightened on his cards. Something's out there, man. No kidding. I felt on edge, not freaked out, but alert. Growing up in rural Wyoming meant the odd mountain lion or bear encounter. Yet, this sound was different, unfamiliar. The scratching was now right outside the RV. It sounded big, way too big to be some critter sniffing around for leftovers. Finn slowly set down his hand. In one fluid motion, he slipped under the table. Finn, what the hell? I hissed. He popped back up, his face grim. In his hand was his hunting rifle, the one he'd insisted on bringing, just in case. The sound stopped, replaced by a silence so heavy it buzzed in my ears. Then came a low rumble. It wasn't quite a growl, but it sent the same message. Back the hell off. I inched toward a window. Through the mesh screen, I couldn't see anything but the black silhouette of something massive, hulking next to the RV. Its shape was all wrong, twisted. Fear squeezed my lungs. This was no ordinary animal. It was like a nightmare made real. A sudden thud on the roof made me yelp. Finn swore, rifle trained upwards. Don't shoot, I hissed. Whatever that is, you'll just piss it off. He didn't respond, his knuckles white on the rifle. The creature was still there. It circled the RV with slow, heavy steps. Each echoing thud sent my teeth chattering. I could hear it sniffing, feel those unnatural breaths against the flimsy metal. Whatever it was, it knew we were trapped. Finn edged towards the door, still aiming the rifle. I'm getting us out of here. Cover me. Are you nuts? It'll hear the engine. My head whipped towards the window. The hulking creature was gone, vanished back into the darkness. He paused, hesitation clear on his face. We can't stay here, he finally said, his voice low and urgent. I glanced around the RV's interior. Everything looked the same, untouched. Whatever the creature was, it didn't break in. Maybe it was just curious. But the sound of low, snuffling breaths from outside shattered that hope. It was still there, just out of sight. Finn had made up his mind. He started the engine with a rumble that ripped through the stillness. I scrambled into the passenger seat, my eyes darting wildly out the windows. The rifle was still in my buddy's hands, aimed straight ahead. We were committed now, ready for a fight. The headlights cut through the darkness, and that's when I saw it. Not hulking next to the RV like before, but standing upright on its hind legs. Good God, it was tall, at least 7, maybe 8 feet. Its form was skeletal, limbs too long, too thin, ending in razor-sharp claws. "Floor it, man," Finn barked. He didn't need to tell me twice. My foot slammed the gas pedal. The RV roared forward, but before we could get any distance, the creature lunged. It slammed into the side of the RV with a force that rocked us. I heard metal groan and bend. Finn fought for control of the wheel as my head cracked against the window. Through the cracked windshield, I saw it in the headlights. It wasn't fur or scales, but something slick, like oily skin pulled taut over those sharp bones. The mouth was all wrong. Like a gash splitting the face, all rows of jagged teeth bared in predatory glee. And the eyes, empty black pits reflecting the headlights. It scrambled to its feet and gave chase with inhuman speed. It ran alongside the RV, swiping at the windows. Glass shattered inward, tiny pieces stinging my skin. "Gun," I screamed, scrambling over the seats to find the rifle thrown under the table. Finn was in a daze, a trickle of blood dripping down his forehead. I ripped the rifle from under the table and fumbled with the safety, my heart thumping in my throat. The creature was gaining ground, its claws scraping against the door. "Shoot it! Shoot it!" I screamed, my voice a strangled yelp. The rifle fired, the sound deafening inside the cramped space. The creature shrieked, a piercing, inhuman cry that cut through the chaos. It reared back, clutching at its side. Finn pumped another round into the chamber, his eyes wild and focused. "Keep driving, get us out of here." I wasn't about to argue. The RV lurched forward, picking up speed. Through the rear window, I saw the creature stumble, then fall and thrash on the ground. Black blood oozed from the wound. My heart was jackhammering in my chest, a mix of fear and nausea flooding my system. We just shot something I didn't even want to think about. Yet, it was the only thing keeping us alive. "We did it, man," I choked out, adrenaline finally starting to crash, leaving me shaking like a leaf. But Finn wasn't celebrating. His gaze was locked on the rearview mirror. "There's another one," and he was right. Another monster had emerged from the shadows, loping along effortlessly, matching our pace. This one was even taller, its limbs like spindly branches, its silhouette impossibly distorted. "It's calling for backup," I yelled. The fear was rising again, a cold wave washing over me. We swerved dangerously through the campground, the second creature always in pursuit. Finn wrenched the wheel this way and that, trying to shake it. An RV wasn't exactly built for a high-speed chase. Finally, we burst through the campground gates onto the open desert road. The RV was fishtailing, nearly out of control, but ahead, the lights of Springdale beckoned. Maybe, just maybe, we could make it. Finn pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The engine roared in protest. But we were gaining ground. The creature was falling behind, its loping stride seeming clumsy on the asphalt. We roared into town, the late-night streets eerily quiet. We'd have to find help, fast. "The police station," I pointed. "There's got to be someone there." Finn took a sharp right, the tires squealing. I braced myself as the station came into view. He swerved into the parking lot, slamming the RV to a jarring halt. We burst through the station doors. Thank God. There was a lone officer at the front desk. His eyes went wide at the sight of us, covered in blood and dirt, both of us wild-eyed and breathless. "We need help," Finn croaked. "Something's out there. It's hunting us." The officer was on his feet in an instant. "What the hell are you talking about?" I choked out the words, barely recognizing my own voice. "Creatures in the desert. They attacked the RV." The officer looked like he was about to dismiss it as a bad drug trip, but something in my eyes stopped him. He opened his mouth, then a deafening screech cut through the air. We spun around. Glass shattered as the creature crashed through the front window, a tangle of limbs and claws. The officer drew his gun. He fired again and again, the shots echoing in the small station. The creature lurched, but it kept coming. It swiped a clawed hand at him, and the officer collapsed, a scream dying mid-throat. "No," I screamed. Finn, always the level-headed one, was already moving. He grabbed the fallen officer's gun and emptied the remaining ammo into the creature. It shrieked, rearing back, blood splattering the walls. Finally, it toppled to the ground, its lanky form twitching, then still. Black blood pooled around it, and a foul stench filled the air. Finn collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. We stared at the dead creature, our minds reeling. Whatever it was, it wasn't an animal. It was something alien. Sirens blared in the distance. It wouldn't be long until backup arrived. Then we'd have to explain this. Explain the impossible. The aftermath was a nightmare mix of red tape and disbelief. The dead creature was hauled away, studied, dissected. We gave statements, had our sanity dissected too. The locals wrote us off as crazies, junkies hallucinating in the desert. Even I had moments where I wondered if it was all a messed up dream. The cops labeled it a vicious animal attack. Maybe a rabid mountain lion with a birth defect. Finn was released quickly, his photography background a clean alibi. "It's me," they eyed suspiciously. Small-town Wyoming boy with a troubled past. They'd have pinned it on me if they could. Eventually, life went. Well, not back to normal, but to some semblance of it. There's a lingering fear now, a constant glance over my shoulder. We never talk about it, Finn and me, but it's always there. Some nights, I think I hear scratching outside my window. Sometimes, I swear I see a hulking shadow lurking just beyond the streetlights. I tell myself it's nothing, but those nights, I double-check the locks. Sleep with a shotgun tucked under the bed. They call them skinwalkers down here. Local law meant to scare kids. But now, I wonder if those old stories hold a grain of truth, a dark echo of something inhuman hiding in the desert. Something I saw with my own damn eyes. Alright, so the one thing I never thought I'd see in the Ozarks was snow in August. But there we were, me and my little brother, Finn. Shivering our asses off in our crappy little RV, staring out at the crazy blizzard going on. Some summer trip, huh? Finn just gave this weak little laugh and rubbed his stubble, that nervous thing he does. See, we were supposed to be on this fun father-son fishing trip to Branson, Missouri. It's a tradition. Our dad, Pops, started it like 20 years ago. Now he's gone. And it's on us to keep it going, even though neither of us is exactly what you'd call a fisherman. This year, I decided to go all out and rent an RV instead of some dumpy motel. It was awesome at first, finally having space to stretch out on the long drive down from Iowa. But being stranded miles from anywhere in this thing, suddenly not so awesome. The storm came out of nowhere. One minute it was all sunshine and blue skies. The next it was like the Arctic had decided to throw up all over the place. This RV wasn't made for this kind of weather. The heater was barely doing anything. We were huddled under blankets, listening to the wind howling like a banshee. We should have bailed the second we saw that forecast, I grumbled. Finn, being Mr. Positive as always, shrugged. At least we got some beers in the fridge. It's like forced bonding, right? I had to chuckle. He can be a real pain sometimes. But my little brother is one of those guys who can crack a joke in a hurricane. A couple of hours in, we tried to sleep. The storm was like our own personal white noise machine. But just as I was drifting off, a sound jolted me awake. It wasn't the storm. It was something heavier, a kind of rhythmic thud against the side of the RV. You hear that? I hissed, sitting straight up. Finn blinked, still half asleep. Hear what? But then it came again. Thud. Definitely coming from outside. An animal. We both peeked through the curtains. You could barely see anything out there, just a blur of white. I don't see nothing, Finn whispered. I pressed closer to the window, straining my eyes. And then, for a split second, I swore I saw something in the swirling snow. A shape. Something impossibly tall and skinny. Then it was gone. Did you see that? I whispered, my voice tight. Finn's grin was gone. See what, man? You're freaking me out. I wanted to just brush it off. Maybe it was the weather. Or I was just tired. But something felt wrong, really wrong. I grabbed the hunting rifle we kept stashed under the table. Better to have it and not need it, right? The rest of the night was pure torture. We huddled together like little kids scared of the dark, whispering, straining to hear anything over the wind. The thuds came and went, like it was circling the RV, echoing against the metal. Finally, as the first bit of daylight started to peek through, the noises stopped. We almost let out a sigh of relief. But then we heard something else. A scratching, low at first, then getting louder, raking against the bottom of the RV, right under the floorboards. Finn went pale. He mouthed the words I was thinking. What the hell is that? I gripped the rifle, my hand shaking. Whatever was out there, it wasn't an animal. It was too smart, too deliberate. I motioned for Finn to stay back. If something burst through the floor, I'd be the first line of defense. The scratching turned into gugging. Whatever it was trying to break in. Then a sharp yelp broke the silence. It wasn't human, but there was a hint of pain in it. It was hurt. Finn looked at me, his eyes huge, a mix of terror and confusion. What do we do? He mouthed. I shook my head. Hell if I knew. We sat there frozen, listening to that godful sound. Time stretched out forever. It could have been minutes or hours. Finally, thank God, the scratching stopped. We waited, hardly daring to breathe. Nothing. No thuds. No scratching, just the wind still howling. I cautiously went for a look through the window. Outside, there was just fresh, white snow, untouched. No footprints, no sign of a struggle, nothing. Whatever the hell it was gone. Is it gone? Finn breathed behind me. I wanted to believe it was, but deep down, I felt this sick feeling that it would be back. And when it did, my stomach churned. Could the rifle even stop something like that? We spent the next few hours coming up with a plan. The snow wasn't letting up. We couldn't stay here, we'd freeze. But going out there blind felt like suicide. Still, whatever that creature was, it was wounded. Maybe we could use that. There's one chance, I finally said to Finn. We lure it out, use this piece of junk RV as a kill box. His eyes widened in protest, but I pressed on, explaining the idea. It was risky, probably insane, but it was our best shot. And I'd be damned if I'd let us become some freak creature's lunch. We waited until dusk, the falling snow muffling our movements. The wound, whatever it was, had to be slowing the creature down. That was our advantage. I rigged up some traps around the RV, the best we could manage under the circumstances. Then, Finn did the bravest thing I've ever seen. He volunteered to be the bait. His reasoning: he was a better runner. I was the one with better aim. He wasn't wrong, I argued, but it was settled. Finn slipped out of the RV, a terrified look on his face that he tried to cover with forced bravery. He took off at a sprint, heading into the trees. His job was to lure the creature out into the open, then lead it back to the RV. My job was to wait. My knuckles were white on the rifle as I positioned myself on the RV's roof. The metal was freezing, snow seeping through my jeans, but adrenaline numbed the cold. The storm had died down, leaving the world in this creepy twilight. I scanned the trees. No movement, no sign of what was lurking out there. My heart was a jackhammer in my chest. 1,000 questions swirled in my head. What was that creature? Why was it hunting us? Was it even alone? Focus, I told myself. Time was running out. I couldn't risk Finn bleeding out or freezing to death out there. Then I saw it. A flicker of movement at the tree line. It moved with this jerky, unnatural grace, like a broken puppet. Tall, way too tall, and stick-thin, its skin hanging loose on its bones. It stepped out into the clearing, and I got my first good look at the damn thing. Its head was all wrong, small and sunken, like the skin had been stretched too tight over the skull. The mouth was gaping wide, full of dagger-like teeth, dripping something that wasn't blood. It was black and oily, its eyes. Oh God, the eyes. They were wide and pure black, reflecting the fading light like two empty holes. It was holding something limp and bloody in one clawed hand. That was Finn's jacket. A rage I'd never felt before surged through me. I aimed the rifle, my vision narrowing to the creature and that torn piece of fabric. Finn was in there somewhere, and this monster was going to pay. My finger squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the stillness, echoing off the trees. The creature reared back, screeching like metal scraping on metal. I pumped another round into the chamber and fired again. It stumbled, that dark fluid oozing from the wound. Hope surged. Maybe there was a chance. The creature turned and ran, disappearing back into the trees with shocking speed. I kept firing, more out of panic than accuracy. By the time the last shot rang out, it was gone, swallowed by the woods. I climbed down from the RV roof, legs shaking. Finn. I had to find him. I followed the faint blood trail into the woods, each drop a stark red splash in the snow, leading me deeper into the cold, dark heart of the forest. After what felt like forever, the trail led me to a small clearing. And there, slumped against a tree, was Finn. His eyes were closed, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Finn. I dropped to my knees beside him. His face was pale as a ghost. His leg, it was mangled, ripped open from the knee down. But he was alive. Thank God, he was alive. I tore strips from my shirt, desperately trying to make a tourniquet. "Hang on, buddy, hang on," I choked out. He was barely conscious, mumbling something I couldn't understand between chattering teeth. "Hold on." My voice cracked with fear. I had to get him back to the RV. Get him help. I hoisted Finn onto my back. He was so heavy. Each step was a battle against the snow and the rising terror clutching at my gut. I don't know how, but I made it back. I got Finn into the RV, cranked the heater, stripped off his soaked clothes, trying to find any other wounds. The leg was the worst, but he had claw marks on his back, too, deep gouges seeping blood. The creature had toyed with him. It could have killed him, but it didn't. Why? The thought sent a new wave of fear through me. It took all my willpower not to break down. I couldn't afford to. I cleaned Finn's wounds as best I could, bandaged them, then got him settled under a mountain of blankets. He was still shivering, slipping in and out of consciousness. Night fell like a shroud. I barricaded the RV as best I could, but I knew it wouldn't hold if that thing came back. The rifle was loaded, and I sat huddled in the corner of the RV, listening. Every creak of metal, every rustle of the wind, sent my heart leaping into my throat. By morning, Finn's fever was raging. He needed a hospital. I waited until dawn, but the creature didn't return. It was out there. I knew it. But it was waiting. The snow had stopped, finally, and that meant visibility. It also meant the roads might be passable. There was a sliver of hope. I made a decision, a crazy, reckless decision. But sitting there waiting for death wasn't an option. We were going. I wrapped Finn in everything I could find and half carried, half dragged him into the driver's seat. I got behind the wheel, hands trembling. I prayed the RV would start. It sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. Relief washed over me. I gunned it, bouncing along the dirt track, praying the tires wouldn't get stuck in the snow. Each mile felt like a marathon, but gradually, the landscape changed, the forest thinning out, signs of civilization popping up. Finn's ragged breathing was the only sound. Hope mingled with fear. We were going to make it. We finally hit a paved road, and I floored it to the nearest town. The hospital was a blur shouting for help, the smell of antiseptic, Finn being wheeled away, and then the blessed numbness of exhaustion as I collapsed into a waiting room chair. The aftermath is a mess. Blurred faces of doctors and cops asking questions I only half understood. Investigations, searches. But they found nothing. No trace of the creature. Finn pulled through, but he's scarred, physically and mentally. Me too. We got lucky. Next time, maybe we won't. The thing in the woods. The old locals whisper about a Wendigo, a vengeful spirit from Native American lore. Maybe. I don't know. All I know is that somewhere out there, it's still waiting. I'm sweating bullets. It's the tail end of summer, and I'm out in my RV, somewhere deep in the southern reaches of the Black Hills National Forest. Solo camping trip, you know. And the freaking AC decides to crap out on me. You'd think it wouldn't get so damn hot inside a forest, but here I am, soaked through and wishing for any kind of breeze. Seriously, nothing ever goes smoothly when I'm out here on my own. Guess I should have stuck to hotels and motels, where at least the AC is halfway reliable. I groan and flip my drenched pillow over to the cool side, trying to get comfortable enough to drift back to sleep. No use. I'm wide awake, and the heat's not helping. I figure I might as well get up, at least take a walk in the cool night air, and maybe, just maybe, See if there's some way to get the blasted AC working again. I grab my flashlight off the bedside table, swing my legs out of bed, and slip into my hiking boots. Better safe than sorry out here in the middle of the night. As soon as I step outside, I know it was the right call. The air is cool and crisp, and the scent of pine fills my lungs. It smells clean out here, a far cry from the stuffy air in the RV. Taking a deep breath, I decide to make a loop towards the front of the campsite. At the very least, I can open up the vents on the dashboard and see if there's any air circulation happening from the night breeze. My flashlight cuts through the woods easily enough, revealing the familiar layout of my campsite. I set the RV up here almost 3 days ago, and I've spent most of my time on day hikes and exploring the forest trails. I even met some nice folks yesterday, a couple, Kyle and Sarah, from Rapid City, out on a day trip. They mentioned that the trails were in good condition, so I shouldn't have any trouble if I decide to check out the southern side of the forest. I tell myself that's a trip for another day. Tonight is about fixing the AC and trying to catch some Z's. The path to the front of the campsite is clear, and within minutes, I'm at the edge of the road. I shine the light into the RV through the open windows. Nothing to see there, just darkness. I let out a sigh and turn towards the back of the RV, and then something catches my eye. It's just a flicker of movement in the tree line. Must be a raccoon digging around for food, I think. I pause, flashing the light toward the trees. Big, black eyes reflecting the light back at me. No, that's not a raccoon. Too big. The shape is wrong. He there, fella, I say out loud, more out of habit than anything else. My voice sounds way too loud in the stillness of the night. I'm usually not so skittish about wildlife, but there's something unsettling about this flicker of movement. The feeling settles deep in my gut. The rustling stops, but there's still something there, in the trees, something that feels too large to be a harmless critter. I shine the light directly at the source of the movement. No more glowing eyes. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Still, it's probably best if I get back inside. Taking a few steps back, I keep the light trained on the spot between the trees. There's nothing but darkness now. I'm about to dismiss it and return to the RV when my ears pick up the crunch of dead leaves underfoot. It's a faint sound, but in the quiet of the forest, I hear it as clear as day. My blood runs a little cold. The movement is slow, hesitant. Whatever it is, it's creeping closer. My heart picks up the pace, and I swear I can feel my pulse pounding in my temples. Is anybody there? I blurt out, my voice shaky. Man, I hate sounding spooked. I swallow hard, willing myself to sound firm. Leave me alone. The shuffling sound halts for a second, and then starts again. It's getting bolder. I'm warning you. I try again, stepping back towards the RV. Panic bubbles in my chest, threatening to choke me. I hear a growl, low and guttural. My mind goes completely blank. This isn't the sound of any animal I've ever heard before. Not in these woods, or anywhere else. It doesn't sound natural. Leave me alone. I yell, my voice cracking. I stumble backwards and almost fall as my foot catches a tree root. The growl intensifies, and I see it, a flash of gray fur under the tree branches, followed by a pair of gleaming yellow eyes. They're not the soft yellow of a deer or cat's eyes reflecting light. They're angry, glowing coals, full of something feral and vicious. Whatever this thing is, it's no woodland creature. I break into a run, all thoughts of the AC gone. I sprint for the RV, tripping over my feet in a rush of adrenaline. My fingers fumble with the lock, and the flashlight drops from my hand, rolling somewhere in the dirt. Come on, come on. I curse under my breath, struggling with the key. I hear a rustling sound right behind me, followed by heavy panting. Its breath is on the back of my neck. It's so close. Somehow, I manage to get the door open, and I practically throw myself inside, scrambling for the lock. I feel a heavy impact against the side of the vehicle as something slams into it. No, no, no. I slam the lock into place and pull the deadbolt down, my hands trembling. Whatever that thing was, it's strong. The RV rocks from side to side, and I hear the sickening thud of claws raking against the metal. It wants in. I'm frozen in place, staring at the door, listening to the scraping and growling just inches away. How the hell am I supposed to get out of this? I can't stay here. Whatever that thing is, it's too strong. It won't give up until it gets inside. My eyes scan the dashboard. The keys are still in the ignition. I should start the engine, get the hell out of here. I hear a new sound, a high-pitched scraping. It's on the roof. I barely register the weight of it settling above me when the roof gives a terrible groan, and the smell of hot metal fills the air. Suddenly, I see them huge, clawed hands tearing through the thin aluminum, ripping it open like tin foil. The edges split open with a noise like ripping fabric. My stomach churns. This thing. It's not even a proper animal. Not a thing that belongs in this world. I can't even process the sight before me. Just a mass of dark fur, sinewy muscle, and a snout filled with long, sharp teeth. Another guttural growl tears out of its throat, and it lunges, squeezing its upper body through the jagged hole in the roof. There's no time. I turn the key in the ignition. The engine roars to life, and I throw the RV into reverse. The vehicle lurches backwards, and I hear the squeal of metal against metal. Whatever that thing is, I've done some damage. I glance up. It's perched on the dash, claws embedded in the upholstery. A wave of nausea rolls over me, hot and sour in my throat. It hisses, and a spray of spittle hits my face. Its breath is putrid, like rotten meat left out in the sun for too long. The road. I slam my foot onto the gas, swerving around the campsite as I head back towards the main road. My hands are slick on the steering wheel, the RV bouncing wildly. But I'm moving. I've got a chance. The thing snarls, twisting its body to face me. It's even uglier up close. There are patches of matted fur where raw skin shows through, oozing some thick, green fluid. The teeth. There are too many rows of them in that impossibly wide mouth, and I swear I see. I slam on the brakes, swerving wildly. My head cracks against the window, and my vision swims. It can't be. I must be seeing things. It had fingers. On those hands, human fingers. The world flips. The RV rolls once, then twice, before coming to a rest on its side. Glass shatters, sending shards into my legs and arms. I taste blood in my mouth. I feel pain everywhere, hot and white and terrible. And then, I fall into darkness. For a moment, there's nothing but the sound of ringing in my ears. Slowly, my eyes flutter open to the sight of the upturned forest, the road upside down. My legs are trapped under the dashboard. I hear it groaning, and the heavy sound of something dragging itself across the broken glass. It's hurt, but it's not giving up. It's coming for me. My legs burn with the effort as I try to free them, but it's no use. I'm pinned. The groaning gets louder, closer. This is it. There's nowhere to run. The thing inches closer, dragging itself towards me on broken forelimbs. My breath hitches as its head dips down, sniffing the air. I try to scream, but my voice fails me. This is it. This is how it ends. Out of nowhere, something hard and heavy smashes into the wreckage next to me. I jolt upward, my heart leaping into my throat. It isn't the creature that's making that awful pounding sound. There's someone out there. I see a figure emerge from the darkness, illuminated by weak headlights in the distance. A woman, screaming something I can't make out. I'm up here. I cough, the words barely audible. Help me. The creature hisses, whipping its head toward the sound of the woman's voice. For a moment, the weight of its attention shifts away from me, and I seize the chance. I pull, straining every muscle in my legs, desperate to free myself. The dashboard shifts a few inches, giving me just enough wiggle room to squeeze out from under it. Glass slices into my legs, and my jeans are immediately soaked with blood, but I don't even feel the pain. I drag myself across the broken floor, reaching out towards the door. The woman is yelling, her voice getting closer. Is she insane? I'm about to yell at her, tell her to run, when something flies past her, shattering a window just behind her head. My blood runs cold. There's another one out there. There's more than one. I scream at the woman, then I see the gun in her hand, and my panic turns to relief. She fires 2 shots into the darkness, the sound echoing through the flipped, over campsite. One of the shots makes contact. There's a shriek, and I hear the sound of something retreating, branches snapping in the distance. I need help. I shout again, my lungs burning. I see you, the woman yells back. We'll get you out of there. Hang on. I hear her fumbling with something, and a moment later I see her. She's younger than I thought, maybe early 20s. She's got short, dark hair and a fierce glare in her eyes. She introduces herself as Riley. She raises the gun again and fires directly into the opening where the creature was. It hisses, and I see a flash of fur as it retreats further into the wreckage. "They don't like fire," she says, and before I can even process her words, she takes a lighter from her pocket and tosses it onto the floor of the RV. The flames catch quickly, spreading to the seat cushions and the plastic dashboard. I cough as smoke fills the air, but I force myself to keep moving. My lungs are on fire, and I can barely see, but I reach for the door handle and fling the door open. Riley and another figure, a man with a thick, grey beard she calls Pops, rush towards me, pulling me away from the burning wreckage. I crumple to the ground, my whole body shaking. It's over. I'm alive. I take gulping breaths of the clean night air, tears of relief and shock streaming down my face. What the hell was that? The words come out as a rasp. Riley shakes her head. You're not gonna believe us. Around here, we call them skinwalkers. My grandma used to tell me stories, she says, her voice laced with a mix of terror and something else, something like grim determination. My dad, he disappeared out this way a few years back. We never found a trace. Skinwalkers. I turn the word over in my head. It doesn't make sense. It sounds like something out of a bad horror movie. But what I saw up there on the roof, it wasn't natural. Whatever it was, they helped me to my feet, and I lean heavily against the side of their truck. The fire department arrives with sirens blaring sometime later. And then there are paramedics, questions, and finally, the blessed relief of a hospital bed. My injuries are extensive cuts, a possible concussion, maybe a broken rib or two. But I'll recover, they tell me. I'm lucky to be alive. Luck doesn't even begin to cover it. I'm discharged a few days later, etching and battered, but with one hell of a story to tell. No one believes me when I tell them what happened in those dark woods, and after a while, I almost stop believing it myself. The whole thing seems like a fever dream, a nightmare so vivid I still wake up sweating sometimes. Riley and Pops come to visit me before I leave the hospital. They tell me their family has been hunting the skinwalkers for generations, trying to keep others safe, even though few will believe their stories. Before they leave, Riley presses a small, worn pendant into my hand. A talisman, she says, meeting my eyes with hers. My grandma swore by them. I'm not much of a superstitious man, but I take it anyway. I still have it tucked under my shirt to this day. Life mostly went back to normal after that. Well, as normal as it can get after having a near-death experience with some kind of cryptid monstrosity. I still go camping sometimes, but I never go alone, and I stick to well-populated state parks these days. Every time I step into the woods, there's a part of me that wonders, expects really, to see a pair of glowing yellow eyes emerge from the darkness. I still don't know for sure what those things were, and maybe it's better that way. But sometimes, when I'm out in the woods, just as the last light fades from the sky, I think I can still hear that low, guttural growl out there in the trees. It's always the quiet bits that freak me out the most, you know, when the crickets stop chirping, and the air goes so still you can hear your own heart thumping in your chest. Yeah, that's where I find myself right now, and it's giving me the serious heebie-jeebies. Alright, back up a little. I'm Jake. I live for weekend road trips, taking my RV, the Wanderer, out to find some new, secluded patch of woods to explore. There's something so peaceful about being out where it's just you, the trees, and maybe a chipmunk or two. Or so I thought. Lately, things have been off. It started 3 weeks ago out in Sequoia National Forest. Beautiful place, towering trees, all that good stuff. First night, I hear this scratching noise outside the Wanderer, right at the corner. Figured it was a raccoon or some other critter, no big deal. Then, after I turn out the lights, I hear that scratching sound again, but this time it sounds higher up, like on the roof. I sit bolt upright in the darkness, trying to convince myself I'm hearing things. Nope, it's claws, definitely claws, scraping across the metal. That night, I don't sleep a goddamn wink. It keeps up off and on. Whatever it is, it's big. Too big to be a raccoon. Next morning, I find fresh scratch marks all over the roof of the Wanderer, deep ones. I pack up and head for home, pretending I didn't spend a good 20 minutes staring out into the trees that morning, half expecting to see a pair of glowing eyes staring back at me. I tried to brush it off as a one-time thing, a weird encounter with some extra-territorial animal. But then, the next trip, and the one after that, it happened again. Same type of scratches, same feeling of unease, and a new bone-chilling sound, a kind of guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. Now, here I am, out in the remote woods of the Olympic Peninsula, trying to enjoy the solitude, and failing miserably. You ever get the feeling you're being watched? That's been my whole trip so far. And it's not deer or birds watching me, it's something else. Whatever it is, it's got me spooked enough to bring the big guns. I'm talking about the 12 gauge tucked behind the driver's seat. I settle down into the evening with a book, trying to distract myself from my overactive imagination. Outside, the wind picks up, and tree branches creak and moan like they have something to say. There are no lights out here, no sign of other campers, just me, the wanderer, and an ever-present sense of unease settling deep into my bones. Around 10:30, I give up on reading and crawl into bed, trying to ignore that persistent feeling of dread. I'm about to drift off to sleep when I hear it. The scratching. It's close this time, like it's right outside the door of the RV. I scramble for the flashlight and throw the curtain back. Outside, the full moon casts a strange, eerie glow over the campsite, and there's nothing there. I take a deep breath and try to convince myself I'm imagining things. But no sooner does that thought cross my mind when I see it, a flicker of movement at the edge of the treeline. My pulse quickens, and the flashlight shakes in my hand. At first, it's just a shadow, dark against the darkness, but then it steps further into the light. Whatever this thing is, it's massive, standing at least 7 feet tall, hunched over with long, gangly limbs. Its fur is pale gray, almost white in the moonlight, and its skin is rough and leathery. Then it turns its head, and under the light of the moon, I see 2 gleaming eyes, a bright, piercing blue that doesn't look natural. It looks predatory. It lifts its head and lets out a low, guttural growl, and I swear I can see a forked tongue slither across its pointed teeth. The flashlight clatters to the floor, and I stumble backward, scrambling for the shotgun behind the seat. My hands tremble as I fumble with the weapon. I hear a loud crash and the unmistakable sound of splintering wood. I don't dare risk a look, but I know it's coming inside. I have just enough time to bring the gun up. Blindly, I aim towards the noise and pull the trigger. The blast echoes through the small space of the wanderer, deafening me and filling the air with a cloud of gunpowder. The creature lets out a shriek, a sound that makes my blood run cold. Did I hit it? I don't know. I don't wait around to find out. I shove the gun aside, throw the wanderer into gear, and slam my foot on the gas. Tires spin on the gravel as the RV lurches forward, bumping over rocks and deadfall as I escape into the night. The trees race past me in a blur, and the headlights cast long shadows that move and dance eerily in my peripheral vision. I keep imagining I see that pale shape, those glowing blue eyes, lurking in the darkness, just beyond the light. My mind races as I drive. The shotgun feels cold and heavy in my lap, but I'm too scared to put it down. I can still hear that unearthly shriek echoing in my ears, and somewhere deep down, I know it's following me. I spend what feels like hours driving through the darkness, never slowing down, never risking a glance in the rearview mirror. Eventually, I see the flicker of streetlights ahead and burst onto a winding stretch of highway. The sight of other cars brings a rush of relief. I'm not alone anymore. I drive until the sun starts to peek over the horizon, finally pulling into a gas station near a small town on the Oregon coast. The bright fluorescent lights feel strangely comforting after the darkness of the woods. I buy myself a cup of terrible gas station coffee and collapse into a chipped plastic booth in the corner. My whole body shakes, and I can barely take a sip of the coffee without spilling half of it. I sit there for a long time, watching the sun rise and trying to process what the hell just happened. I try to convince myself it was just a bear, a really big, messed up bear that maybe the moonlight and distress warped its appearance, made me see things that weren't there. But I know that's not the whole truth. It moved too fast. It looked too unnatural. Those eyes. I dig my phone out of my pocket and start making calls. First, to the police. I tell them I was attacked, that something damaged my RV out in the woods, that I fired a couple of shots to scare it off. They're not thrilled about the illegal weapon discharge, but they promise to send someone to investigate the area. My next call is to a tow company. Getting that battered RV out of the woods feels like the first step towards reclaiming my life after this nightmare. I end up spending the rest of the day in that gas station, drinking bad coffee and trying to avoid eye contact with the locals, who keep darting curious glances at this jittery mess of a man clutching a shotgun. It's late afternoon when a ranger arrives. Turns out they found the remnants of my campsite. I tell him what little I'm willing to reveal. Something big messed up my rig out in the woods, probably an animal. He nods slowly, taking notes. He doesn't believe a word of it. I can tell it in his eyes, but he's seen some messed up things in the woods over the years and knows better than to push. Have you heard any other reports about something like this? I try to sound casual, but my voice is strained. He rubs his face and glances at his notes. There was a missing persons case a few weeks back. Hiker up around the north end of the park. We searched for a week but found no trace. You think? He trails off, giving me a hard look. I shake my head. I don't know, honestly. I'm not sure what I saw. My own words feel hollow. What I saw, that thing, it could easily have taken a man. The ranger doesn't say anything, just grunts and heads out. I stay at the gas station until the tow truck arrives late that night. It's slow going getting the Wanderer back to Portland, and we don't reach the city until well past dawn. I pay the driver extra to help me get the RV into a storage lot. Then I catch an Uber home, collapse into my own bed, and sleep for a solid 15 hours. When I wake up, the world feels a little less shaky. I spend the day making calls to insurance adjusters and body shops. My story sticks. Something damaged the RV. I fired a few shots to scare it off. I never mentioned the creature. Who would believe me? In the weeks that follow, I start to second guess myself. Could it have been some kind of escaped exotic animal? Some mountain lion that's lost its fear of humans? But those teeth, that tongue, and there's no animal that moves like that. I find myself scouring the internet, reading every old news article, every crackpot blog post about cryptid sightings in the Pacific Northwest. That's how I learn about them. The Nalpum. The stories describe a creature that hunts the dense forests of the region. Preying on those who dare venture too far from civilization. It walks on two legs but looks like no human ever seen. Tall, pale, with eyes that flash an impossible blue. They say it's malevolent, and that there's something in its presence, something that makes your blood run cold and your instincts scream danger. As soon as I read it, I know that's my monster. There's a name for the thing that stalked me in the woods. I'll never be able to prove it, but then again, maybe it's better that way. Because if there's one Nalpum out there, who knows how many others are lurking in the shadows, just waiting for their next victim. So, Labor Day weekend was coming up, and what better way to kiss summer goodbye than a solo camping trip up to the Hoh Rainforest. Washington State, prime spot, ancient trees, mossy trails, you know, the whole Pacific Northwest magic thing. I'm more of a, let's say, comfortable camper. I bring my electric kettle, a good book, you get the idea. Name's Alex, by the way. And if I'm being honest, this trip's about getting some headspace as much as it is about nature. Girl stuff, you know. The first couple of days are awesome. Easy hike in, and I spend hours just wandering around, snapping pics of the sunlight filtering through those massive trees. The forest is buzzing birds, wind in the leaves, a woodpecker going to town somewhere in the distance. Nights, it's just stars and my little solar-powered lantern. I just soak up the quiet. Then, on the morning of the third day, I wake up feeling off. It's hard to describe, just this prickly feeling on the back of my neck. I figure it's just bad dreams or maybe too much camp coffee. I shake it off. Today's plan is a longer hike into the old growth area, and I'm not letting some weird feeling ruin it. Once I hit the trail, I feel better. This part of the rainforest is insane. Trees you could drive a truck through, everything covered in moss. It feels ancient, like you can almost hear the centuries whispering in the wind. But then, the prickly feeling is back. It's like I'm being watched. I tell myself it's just nerves and keep going. I take some more pictures, but I keep catching movement out of the corner of my eye. I turn, and nothing's there. Just ferns, trees, sunlight playing tricks. Maybe it's the caffeine making me jumpy, I think. Everyone gets spooked in the woods alone sometimes, right? Just need to chill. I push on, but the feeling just gets worse. Then, I hear a loud snap up ahead. I freeze. That was no squirrel. My heart's hammering. I slowly turn my head, and through the ferns, I see it, a dark shape moving parallel to me in the undergrowth. It's big, too big for a deer. I take a step back. Hello. My voice is just a croak. Real dumb, right? Yelling out like that. This thing, whatever it is, it's hiding. And now I'm just drawing attention to myself. No answer, but I see it again, a tall, dark shape moving through the trees. Then, nothing. Just silence. I wait, trying to slow my breathing. This is when I should turn back. But I've got this stupid voice in my head saying I need to see what it is. I have to know. So, I creep forward, real slow, checking every shadow, every rustle. I take maybe 5 steps, and then I see it. It's tall, impossibly tall, and skinny, crouched behind a mossy log. Its fur is so dark it blends right in, but its eyes, they're glowing, staring right at me. My blood turns to ice. This thing, it's wrong. We stare at each other for a second. It doesn't move, just stares. Those eyes, they're intelligent, but not like an animal. It's malicious. Then, I see a flash of teeth, too sharp, and it lets out this twisted snarl. And it lunges. I bolt. I run like hell, tripping over roots, thorns tearing at my skin. My heart's going crazy. I keep thinking, don't look back, don't look back. But I can hear it behind me, crashing through the undergrowth, getting closer. I see the clearing ahead, my campsite. I might actually make it. Then, I hit something. I didn't even see it. It's a thick, sticky strand stretched across the trail. I go flying, hit the ground hard. I can't breathe. I try to get up, but my legs are tangled. It's like a giant spiderweb, but stronger. I'm stuck. I look around for something, anything, to cut myself free. Nothing. And then I see it. It steps out of the trees. It's tall, dripping with those sticky strands. Its limbs are long and spindly, with these wicked claws. Its fur is patchy, messed up, and its skin looks leathery and gray. Those eyes are glowing. It lets out this ear-splitting screech, and its lips peel back, showing rows of needle-sharp teeth. My mind is screaming, "This isn't a spider." I grab my pocket knife, the only thing I have, and start hacking at the strands. They're tough, but I start making progress. It's walking towards me, slow, making this gurgling sound in its throat. It's terrifying. I try to stab at it with the knife, but it just bounces off its leathery skin. It screeches again, and this time, another one answers from somewhere in the woods. There's more than one. I start sawing at the strands with the knife, using a rock to help. I'm desperate now. Adrenaline's pumping. It's working, slowly. The thing hisses and lunges, slashing at my arm with its claws. I scream. It hurts like hell. I look down, and there's blood everywhere. I can barely hold the knife, but I'm almost free. Just a little more. Then, snap. The last strand breaks. I scramble back, still tangled, but I can move. I run for my campsite. I'm so close, but it's fast. It streaks across the clearing, blocking my path. It towers over me. This thing, it looks almost human, but twisted wrong. I'm going to die. Then, I see it, my hatchet, by the fire pit. I don't even think. I lunge for it, grab the handle, and swing with everything I've got. The hatchet sinks into its shoulder. It howls, this black ooze pouring out. I yank the hatchet free and swing again. It ducks, then lunges for my throat. I barely dodge, but its claws rake across my cheek. I scream and swing again. The hatchet connects with its head. It staggers back, hissing, clutching its face. I don't wait. I run for my campsite, grab my go bag that I always keep ready, just in case. I shove everything in sleeping bag, first aid kit, flashlight. I throw the bag over my shoulder and run. I don't look back. I run forever. My lungs are burning, my wounds are screaming. I trip, fall, get up. Keep running. I can hear them, maybe crashing through the woods behind me. Finally, I burst out of the forest and onto the old logging road. I flag down the first car I see, a beat-up old pickup. The driver, an old guy, barely says a word. I'm covered in blood, babbling like a lunatic. He drives me to the nearest ranger station. The ranger there calls for backup and an ambulance. I spend a few days in the hospital, getting patched up. The doctors try to tell me it was an animal attack, but I know what I saw. They never find anything, just some scraps of that weird webbing. The rangers don't believe me. They file a report, call it a possible bear encounter, and send me on my way. I try to forget about it. I really do. Life goes back to normal. I have some wicked scars. I definitely give up solo camping, crowded state parks from now on, but sometimes, late at night, I wake up in a cold sweat, seeing those glowing eyes. They say the forest remembers. They say the trees have long memories. I think about those ancient trees in the Ho, and the whispers in the wind. The locals call it the quiet forest, because there aren't many animals. Maybe there's a reason. The Quileute tribe. They have stories about things in those woods, old things, things that steal your nightmares. They call them Tsitsel, skinwalkers, things that were never human but wear our faces. Maybe I was lucky, or maybe they let me go for a reason, a warning. Whatever those things are, I have a feeling I haven't seen the last of them. So, about a year ago, I decided to give this whole overlanding thing a shot. You know, those YouTube videos with guys in tricked-out rigs disappearing into the wilderness. Looked like freedom. And since I was working remotely, I figured, why not? Adventure and a paycheck. win-win. The Best Buy parking lot wasn't exactly the open road, but wiring up solar panels for my converted camper was a start. Finally got the setup dialed in after way too many how-to videos. A couple of weeks later, I was on I-80 heading west. Now, I'm not into the touristy stuff. Zion, Yellowstone, too many people. I was looking for those hidden gems, the places no one talks about. So this is a story about a time I took a detour through Red Basin National Forest and encountered something that shook me to my core. It was supposed to be a simple shortcut, a way to avoid some highway traffic, but it turned into something far more sinister. Red Basin National Forest isn't exactly a popular destination. In fact, most people I mentioned it to had never even heard of it. Unlike other more well-known locations associated with mysterious creatures, such as the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, where the legendary Sasquatch, or Bigfoot, is said to roam. But there it was on my map, a winding road cutting through a swath of green, promising a quicker route to my destination. So, I took it. As I drove deeper into the forest, the trees grew denser, the sunlight struggling to penetrate the thick canopy. The air grew heavy with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. There was an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves. I hadn't seen another car for miles, and a sense of isolation began to creep in. Then, I saw them, the tracks. They weren't like anything I'd ever seen before. They weren't from a deer, a bear, or any other animal I could think of. They were long, narrow impressions in the soft earth, with what looked like claw marks. They were unsettling, to say the least. A shiver ran down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and I found myself constantly checking my mirrors, scanning the woods for any sign of movement. And then, I saw it. It was a tall, thin figure, almost skeletal in its appearance, lurking in the shadows among the trees. It was difficult to make out in the dim light, but it seemed to be humanoid in shape, with long, slender limbs. It slithered through the trees with an eerie fluidity, its limbs contorting in ways that defied the laws of nature. Fear gripped me. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, desperate to get away from this creature, whatever it was. But it was too late. As my RV picked up speed, the creature darted out from the trees and slammed its hand against the window. The glass shattered. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the vastness of the forest. I swerved the RV, narrowly avoiding a collision with a tree, and sped off, leaving the creature behind. Shaken and terrified, I eventually made it to a town and called the police. They investigated, of course, but found no evidence of the creature or the tracks I had described. They dismissed it as a case of overactive imagination, perhaps fueled by fatigue or the isolation of the wilderness, a common explanation for such encounters. It's not uncommon for people to report strange occurrences in national parks, from mysterious disappearances to encounters with unidentified creatures. In one instance, a hiker described being led deep into the woods by a woman who claimed her friend needed help, only to find himself completely lost and alone. But I know what I saw, even now, weeks later. I can't shake the feeling of dread that washes over me whenever I think about that day in Red Basin National Forest. I still feel uneasy in the wilderness, constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see that shadowy figure emerge from the trees. a friend of mine who is interested in the paranormal, suggested that I might have encountered one of the ancient creatures that are said to inhabit the wilderness, beings that have existed for centuries, hidden from human eyes. Perhaps it was a creature like the Alaska Bushman, or Tornit, a hairy, half-human creature believed to roam the Alaskan wilderness, causing mischief and unexplained events. Perhaps it was a creature of myth and legend, a being that should have remained in the shadows. Whatever it was, I know that my encounter in Red Basin National Forest was not a figment of my imagination. It was a chilling reminder that there are still mysteries in this world, things that we cannot explain, things that lurk just beyond our understanding. This encounter left me with a profound sense of vulnerability, a feeling of losing control in the face of the unknown. Similar to the experience of a sailor who witnessed an unexplained glowing phenomenon at sea and was left shaken and unable to forget the incident. This encounter in Red Basin National Forest serves as a chilling reminder that there are still mysteries in this world that defy explanation. Whether the creature was a figment of the imagination, a misinterpretation of a known animal, or a truly unknown entity, the experience left a lasting impact on me. It speaks to our primal fear of the unknown, the creatures that may lurk in the shadows, and the vulnerability we feel when confronted with the unexplained. This story also highlights the power of the wilderness to evoke both wonder and fear. While national parks and forests offer opportunities for adventure and exploration, they also hold the potential for unexpected and unsettling encounters. This tale serves as a cautionary reminder to respect the natural world and to be prepared for the unexpected when venturing into the unknown. This encounter serves as a stark reminder that despite our attempts to conquer and understand the natural world, there are still forces beyond our comprehension, lurking in the shadows, waiting to remind us of our own mortality and the fragility of our existence. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls through the trees, I can still hear the shattering of glass and the echo of that creature's chilling scream. I live in Wyoming. It's awesome if you're into the outdoors, which I totally am. I'd been itching to get out of town for a while, so last month I loaded up my RV and headed for Bighorn National Forest. Most folks hit up Yellowstone, but I can't stand crowds. Bighorn's quiet, the scenery's insane. Yeah, it's my kind of place. First few days were exactly what I needed. Hiked up to this place called Bucking Neal Falls, did some fishing, found a killer spot for the RV way off on a service road. Not a soul in sight for miles. Felt like paradise. Honestly, I thought maybe I'd even crack open the book I'd brought. What kind, you ask? Oh, it's some economics thing, total nerd out for me. Not everyone's cup of tea. Anyway, the third night, that's when things got kinda weird. It was late. I'd had some whiskey to warm up, so I figured it was probably nothing. But I hear this, like, scratching sound at the side of the RV. Made me jump, I thought. Damn, must be mice or something. Not a second later, though. There's this thump up on the roof. Heavier, way heavier. Now I'm sweating a little because, come on, what the hell's out there? A bear. Never heard of one getting onto an RV roof. Plus this. It didn't sound quite like claws. More like hands. Hearts hammering. I get up real slow, didn't want to make any sudden noises. Peek out the window, it's pitch dark. Can't see a damn thing. Then I hear it. breathing, ragged, almost like a man, but deeper, kind of rasping, like somebody's got a real bad throat infection. Chills, man. I swear I get chills right now just thinking about it. The breathing stops. Then another thud. It drops off the RV, and whatever it is starts pacing around outside. I can hear, well, they sound like footsteps, heavy ones, but off, you know. Like the pattern's a bit too long, like the thing's legs are longer than they should be. At some point, I realize I'm holding my breath. Figure I better get a handle on things, right? So I go for my flashlight, best one I've got, big military style one. My hands are shaking, but I figure I gotta see what's out there. I count to 3, throw open the curtains, and blast the light out the window. Full on sweat team style, I'm telling you. And nothing. Empty. The ground's all torn up like something big struggled there. But whatever made the tracks is long gone. Now okay, I'm a reasonable guy, always have been. I start telling myself, hey, must have been a drunk, wandered off. Hell, maybe it was an animal, just sounded different in the dark. But I didn't buy it. Those steps, that breathing, there was something off about the whole thing. Here's the thing though. Morning comes, the sun's out, and it's hard to stay worked up. I start figuring I must have imagined half of it. Hell, even the torn up tracks don't seem as bad in daylight. Probably just a moose or something. That's how I convinced myself to stick it out another night. Big mistake. Because that night, it came back. I wasn't even asleep. I'm laying in bed, getting that weird prickly feeling, you know, like you're being watched. Suddenly, there it is. The ragged breathing, right outside the window. It's circling, I can tell, hear the footsteps, heavy and deliberate. And that damn rasping breath, almost like it's sniffing. Then, and this is the part that still makes my skin crawl, there's a click, a scratch. Like nails on metal, right against the glass. I flinch back, but it keeps going, slow back and forth. Like the thing is trying to get a look inside. Then, a bang, hard against the RV, and the whole thing shakes. That's when I lose it. I reach for my gun. I'm a good shot, I hunt sometimes, so I'm not worried about missing. Whatever's out there, all I'm thinking is, scare the living daylights out of it. Make it clear this ain't a place it wants to mess with. I throw open the door, gun out in front. I'm ready to blast whatever comes charging out. I shout, "Get the hell out of here," trying to sound brave, even though my legs are shaking like a damn leaf. But again, nothing. I sweep the area with my flashlight. Empty. Now I'm freaked. Real freaked. Because there's new tracks, big ones, like the footprints I saw last night, only deeper, and they lead off into the trees. I stand there, heart pounding, gun raised, waiting for something to attack. I don't know, the silence is worse than any scream. Worse than anything, because I know this thing, whatever it is still out there, watching. And I'm just sitting here like a big, fat target in my lit-up RV. For the first time, I don't just feel scared, I feel stupid, outmatched. Like I've bitten off way more than I can chew. There's only one sane thing to do: pack up and get the hell out of there. I do it fast, fumbling with the keys, hands shaking. Then I floor it out onto the main road. For miles. I keep expecting to see those glowing eyes in the rearview mirror, that loping figure coming after me. But nothing. I just drive all night and finally stop at some truck stop off the interstate. Figure there are enough people around to be safe, right? Even there, I can't relax. I sit in a booth, drinking bad coffee, jumping at every sound. I call my brother Mark. He's an ex-army guy, so I figure he'll level with me, tell me if I'm overacting. Instead, he just listens, real serious. Then he says, "You remember Pete? Pete was a buddy of ours, died in Afghanistan, IED or something." Well, Mark goes, "He told me something once. Out there, in the mountains, on patrols, he saw things they weren't supposed to talk about." His voice gets real quiet. "One you told me about the breathing, that clicked for me." "So what, Mark? What are you saying?" I ask. And he says, "I'm saying, if you saw what you think you saw, well, maybe there's a reason those places stay empty. Maybe the folks who live out there know better than to mess with whatever's in the darkness." I don't sleep that night. I don't sleep much for nights after. I'm jumpy, seeing things at the edge of my vision. I keep the gun close, even in the damn shower. My buddy, Ralph, thinks I might be losing it a little. I'm thinking the same damn thing, to be honest. A couple of weeks ago, I decided to go back. Not back to Bighorn, mind you, but to my RV. Figured I can't just let it sit there. Took Ralph and his rifle with me, just in case. Daytime, though, so I felt a bit better. We pull up to the spot, and that's when it really hits me. The place gives me some serious willies now. There's this feeling, like it's waiting, like whatever the hell was out there, it's expecting me back. Ralph looks at me. "You sure about this, man? Place looks kind of..." "Yeah," I cut him off. "'Cause what else am I going to do, leave my RV to rot?" I get the keys out, start for the door when I stop. There, in the dirt right by the step, it's a handprint. It looks human, but it ain't. Too big, for one thing. The fingers are too damn long, and those nails, like claws, black, like they were dug into something still living. "Ralph," I say, my voice kind of squeaky. Look at that." He bends down, his face goes real pale. "Jesus, man. What the hell is that?" He points to another mark I hadn't even noticed. "Look. It looks like the thing was trying to climb up to the window." It's been weeks now, and I still don't know exactly what I saw up there. But I'll tell you this, I won't be going back, not ever. And yeah, I sold the RV. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that scratch at the window, and I wake in a cold sweat, remembering that awful, ragged breath. It happened a few years back when my buddy, Mark, and I decided to get all adventurous and hike the Lewitt Trail. That's the one that circles Mount St. Helens, you know, the volcano that went boom in the 80s.
Yeah, that one.
We thought we were real outdoorsy types, figured it'd be a nice break from our usual weekend routine of video games and pizza. I'm Alex, by the way. So we get there, and right off the bat, the place is giving me the heebie-jeebies. It's in the blast zone, right? So it's all barren and ashy, like a scene out of a post-apocalyptic movie. And it's dead quiet. No birds, no squirrels. Not even the buzz of a damn fly. Kind of unsettling, but we brushed it off. We'd been hiking for a few hours when we found this clearing. Perfectly round, like someone had taken a giant cookie cutter to the ground. Nothing growing, just ash and rock. It was weird, unnatural. We both felt it, this prickling on the back of our necks. "Let's keep moving," Mark said, and I didn't need to be told twice. We camped that night a few miles away, in this little hollow. The kind of place where every snap of a twig sounds like a gunshot. And let me tell you, there were a lot of snaps and rustles. And then there was this other sound. A sort of chittering, low and guttural. like nothing I'd ever heard before, and I've spent my fair share of time in the woods. It was enough to keep us wide awake. Huddled in our sleeping bags, clutching our measly little camping knives like they were Excalibur. Next morning, we decided to hightail it out of there. But first, like idiots, we went back to that clearing. And that's when we saw them tracks. Huge. 3 toed prints with claws that looked sharp enough to gut a car. They were sunk deep in the ash, like whatever made them was heavy. Really heavy. A shiver went down my spine that had nothing to do with the morning chill. We didn't say anything, just grabbed our packs and started walking. Fast. We were making good time, trying to put as much distance as possible between us and that creepy clearing, when Mark suddenly stopped. He was staring at something on the trail ahead, his face whiter than a ghost. I looked, and my blood turned to ice. More tracks. Fresh ones. Leading in the same direction we were headed. And then we heard it again, that chittering. Closer this time. We broke into a run. A full-on sprint, not caring about the noise or the branches whipping our faces. We just wanted to get out of there. We were rounding a bend when Mark tripped. He went down hard, and that's when we saw it. Standing on a ledge, maybe 20 feet away, was this thing. Tall and gaunt, with skin like old parchment stretched over bones. Its head was smooth, featureless except for 2 black, slitted eyes that seemed to bore into our souls. It let out that chittering sound again, a sound that seemed to vibrate in my chest. And then it moved. It moved with a speed that was just wrong, blurring across the distance between us. I had a hunting rifle slung across my back, more for show than anything, but instinct took over. I raised it, aimed, and fired. The sound of the shot was deafening in the stillness. The thing recoiled, a screech escaping its throat that sounded like nails on a chalkboard. Then, it was gone, scrambling up the rocks and disappearing into the trees. We didn't stop running until we reached the parking lot, bursting out of the woods like a couple of lunatics. We tried to tell the rangers what we'd seen, but they just gave us these pitying looks. Maybe we imagined it. The stress, the isolation, the weirdness of the place. It could mess with your head, right? But those tracks, and that thing's eyes. I still see them sometimes in my nightmares. We never went back to Mount St. Helens, and every now and then, I'll see a news article about someone going missing in that area. It makes me wonder, are there things out there that we're not meant to see? Things better left undisturbed in the wild, forgotten corners of the world? I think so. I really do. And sometimes, I think they're watching us, too, waiting, chittering. A few years back, I got this crazy idea to drive the whole Alaska highway. Not in some fancy camper van with Instagram filters and lats. No sir, I'm talking about the real deal. My beat up Tacoma, a tent, and a whole lot of middle of nowhere on the map. My name's Jake, by the way, and being an ex-army guy, I figured I could handle some solitude. And Lord knows Alaska's got that in spades. Now, I ain't the superstitious type, but after about 2 weeks on the road, I started getting this creepy feeling, like something was watching me. But not something right, you know. I was driving this long, empty stretch of highway near Rangel, St. Elias National Park. Mountains like angry giants on the horizon, the sun dipping low, throwing everything into those long, spooky shadows. That's when I saw it. Way off to the side of the road, this figure. Anyone with a lick of sense knows you don't pick up hitchhikers in a place like that. But something about this thing, the way it stood so still, tilted at an odd angle, it made me slow down. As I got closer, I realized this wasn't a person. Not any person I'd ever seen. Tall and gaunt, like it had been stretched out, all skin and bone showing through ripped clothes. But its facave, that's what really got me. No eyes, just hollows, and a mouth stretched way too wide, like a starved man's grin. I floored it, tires squealing, and hauled ass out of there. Didn't look back. Just drove until the rearview mirror was empty and my heart wasn't trying to beat its way out of my chest. Found a pull off to spend the night. Figured I needed a drink, or 3. It was near dawn when I woke up, the whole truck shaking. Thing is, there wasn't a breath of wind. I peeked out the window, and there it was. Crouched down right next to my truck, long, bony fingers scratching at the metal. I grabbed my rifle, levered a round in. That should scare it off, right? Wrong. The thing just lifts its head, stares at me with those empty sockets, and lets out this shriek that made my blood run cold. Then it scrambles off into the trees, fast as a damn spooked cat. Next morning, I'm at the ranger station, trying to explain what I saw. The guy behind the desk, old Tom, he just nods real slow. "You seen the Nanook?" he says, voice low. "It's an old story around here, but folks mostly think it's just that, a story." Tom tells me the tribes have legends about this thing, a shape-shifting creature, a hunter of the lost and lonely. It preys on your fear, drives you mad. Says if you see it, you get the hell out of there and don't look back. I'm skeptical, but I ain't about to test that theory. Grab my stuff, hit the road, and I don't stop driving till I'm safely across the Canadian border. Couple nights later, I'm in this motel room, trying to convince myself it was all shadows and bad dreams. That's when the scratching starts at the window. Faint, like fingernails on glass, but it's there. And I just know what I'm gonna see if I pull back that curtain. Instead, I do the only thing I can think of, pack my stuff and run. Again. I drive all night and most of the next day, end up stranded on some dusty road in Montana when my truck finally gives up the ghost. Cell service is spotty, but I manage to get a hold of my buddy Mark. He's an hour out, got a tow rig, and most importantly, a bottle of whiskey. As the sun's setting, casting those long shadows again, Mark shows up. Bless that big, dumb Texan. First thing he does is crack open the whiskey and hand me a swig. "You look like you saw a ghost, man," he laughs, clapping me on the back. But as we're hooking up the truck, he goes real quiet. "Jake, what the hell did that to your door?" He's pointing to 3 long gouges etched into the metal, deep enough to make the paint curl back. I don't answer, because I know. The Nanook, the shapeshifter, whatever it was, it followed me. We don't say much the rest of the way back. Every rustle of leaves, every flicker of headlights has me jumping. Mark, he doesn't tease. Just hands me that bottle every now and then, and lets me stare out the window into the darkness. So yeah, maybe this whole RV life, hitting the open road thing is a bit played out. But hey, when you cash out of your company at 33 with more money than you ever imagined, Klitcher starts looking pretty damn good. Besides, it's not like I'm just kicking back in my tin can, braiding friendship bracelets. I do freelance gigs, keep myself busy. This time, I landed in Olympic National Park, not the beachy part, mind you, but the rainforest. Found this killer secluded spot down some crazy logging road, miles from anyone, tucked beside a rushing river. It's the kind of place that makes city folk nervous, but for me, pure bliss. Rain was coming down sideways this morning, like it always does here, but now the sun's peeking through, making the moss glow like neon. I was working away, minding my own business, when bam, something slammed into my RV. Hard, like someone chucked a rock at it. Now there's nobody out here for miles. So I poked my head out, half expecting to see, I don't know, a squirrel with a vendetta against Winnebagos. But nothing. That's when the scratching started. Low, against the metal, like something dragging long claws along the side. I peeked out the window, thinking maybe a bear was on a sugar rush, but I couldn't see anything. The sound moved up, scratching at the roof now. Definitely not a bird. Way too big and strong for that. I grabbed my bear spray, the kind that could stop a grizzly in its tracks, but I hesitated. Whatever was out there sounded massive, too big and fast for me to feel comfortable confronting it head on. Finally, it stopped. The silence was so thick, it was deafening. I waited a good 20 minutes, and when nothing else happened, I figured whatever it was had moved on. Yeah, I should have split right then. That would have been the smart move. But here's the thing. There's smart, and then there's curious. Guess which one usually wins out with me? I opened the door, taking a step out and scanning the trees. Dense forest stared back, leaves dripping with rain. Nothing moved. But I knew better than to be fooled. I took another step, heading for the side of the RV where the scratching was loudest. It had left marks. That was for sure, long gashes in the paint. But no footprints, no fur, nothing I could use to figure out what I was dealing with. That's when I saw the blood. Right on the edge of a nasty scratch, a smear of red. Not animal blood, I don't think. The color was too dark, and I didn't smell that metallic tang. Someone had been out here, or rather, something. Adrenaline surged through me. I followed the blood trail, and it led me into the woods. Not far, just to the edge of the trees. There, caught on a branch, was a piece of cloth blue flannel, torn like something with claws had ripped through it. My fingers brushed it, and the coarse weave felt familiar. It was the same pattern as a flannel I'd seen a couple of weeks back in the little town where I'd stocked up on supplies. A lumberjack type had been wearing it, a big dude with a beard, one of those quiet mountain man types. I pushed down the fear rising in my throat. Okay, so maybe something got to the lumberjack before that scratching sound came from my RV. But I was armed, I was cautious, and whoever was hurt couldn't be far off. I might be able to help. I followed the trail deeper, the flannel scraps and bloodstains a grim path into the green maze. Then the trees opened up a little, and that's when I saw the shack. Now, I don't mean a cabin, not some cute little thing. This was rough walls slapped together from unpainted boards, half hidden under mossy vines. A coil of smoke spiraled from a crooked chimney. It sat in a clearing littered with rusting tools, gnawed bones, and more scraps of that blue flannel. My skin prickled. This was no hunter's hideaway, no abandoned forest shack. This place reeked of wrongness. As I stood there, debating whether to run like hell or play the hero, a voice rasped from inside the shack. "Found you." The voice was dry, like it hadn't been used in ages, and the pitch was too low to be fully human. My body decided for me. I turned and bolted, the woods a blur around me. I didn't stop until my RV came into sight, its familiar shape promising some sliver of safety. I slammed inside, locking the door behind me, my heart hammering in my chest. I knew I couldn't stay. I had to get the hell out of there. Drive till I found cell service, report everything. But as I went to start the engine, a sound echoed outside, that scraping, dragging noise against the roof. I crept to the window, peeking out. There it was, crouched on my RV. No bear, no cougar, nothing I could name. Its skin was pale gray, stretched tight over sharp bones. Its limbs were too long, ending in hands that were more like claws. But its head, was a grotesque mockery of a human skull, the eyes sunken and glowing with an eerie light. I don't know what I saw that day, but I don't think it was ever truly human. It turned its head towards me, and a grin stretched across its deformed face. That's when I saw the blood staining its teeth and the strip of blue flannel hanging from its mouth. The creature crouched outside, its claws tapping rhythmically against the roof. It wasn't going anywhere. I looked around the RV, frantic for something I could use. My gaze fell on the bear spray, useless against whatever that was, and my hunting knife. Good for prepping food, not so much against a nightmare beast. There was no winning a fight like this, not trapped in here. I had to get out, find some sort of cover. I couldn't go out the door, it was watching. But there was the roof hatch, the one I used to clean the solar panels. I swung it open, trying to make as little noise as possible, and my head hit fresh air. I was up before I knew it, scrambling onto the roof of my RV. My heartbeat thrashing in my ears, making it hard to hear the thing's movements. I glanced down. It was still there, crouched by the driver's door, those sunken eyes locked on me. I wanted to scream, to break the unnatural stillness. But I knew noise would only draw it in. I had to reach the tree line. If it followed me, I might have a chance among the tangled growth, a shot at losing it. Taking a deep breath, I jumped. I hit the ground harder than I expected, the impact jarring my knees. The creature instantly reacted, scrambling off the RV and onto the ground with an awful clicking noise. That's when I saw its feet, hooves. Cloven hooves. My brain stumbled over the sight. It couldn't be real, yet there it was, unnatural, impossible, and terrifyingly fast as it charged straight for me. I took off running, the woods a blur before me. I glanced back and instantly regretted it. The thing was gaining, its distorted limbs propelling it forward in loping strides like some unholy demon, goat hybrid. A root snagged my foot, pitching me forward. The world spun, and I slammed into the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of me. Gasping, I tried to shove myself up, but before I could, it was on me. It came from above. Dropping onto my back with a grunt that was shockingly human for how inhuman the creature looked. Claws gogged my shoulders as it raked them. I let out a yell, pure pain and terror, and thrashed wildly. I must have flipped us because suddenly we were rolling, me flailing and the beast screeching a high-pitched squeal. Through the struggle, my hand caught on something, a broken branch jutting from the ground. Without thinking, I grabbed it and rammed the jagged end upwards. The creature shrieked in agony, its weight shifting off me. I scrambled away, a sob tearing out of my throat. I didn't look back, just ran. Branches tearing at my face, the creature's pained screeching fading behind me. I ran until my lungs burned, and even the fear couldn't force my feet to keep moving. collapsing behind a mossy tree trunk. I gasped for breath, my whole body trembling. I was alone. The woods were silent. I sat there, huddled for what felt like hours. The shock kept the full force of what had happened at bay. Had I stabbed at the thing? Had I killed it? And if not, where was it now? The sun was setting by the time I pulled myself together enough to move. With numb legs and a mind buzzing with adrenaline and terror, I stumbled back in the direction of my RV. I found it half destroyed. The creature had torn off a door, ripped open a tire, and left claw marks gashed deep into the metal. It was still waiting for me. This time, it didn't charge. It crouched near the treeline, watching, and in the last light of day, I saw more clearly the thing protruding from its misshapen chest, the wooden stake I had shoved through its body. It wasn't going to follow me. I turned and walked away, leaving the RV and the nightmare behind. I don't know how I made it out of the woods, how I found the highway, how I flagged down a car. The people who stopped were kind, shocked by my disheveled state, but quick to offer help, a phone, a ride back to civilization. The police searched the woods. They didn't find any sign of the creature or the lumberjack, but they did find my RV a few days later. They didn't believe my story, of course. Wild animal attack, they said. Maybe a crazed hermit in the woods. That's easier to swallow than whatever I saw out there. People tell me I should sell the RV, give up this life, that I'm lucky to be alive. Maybe they're right. But there's this voice in my head, a whisper telling me it ain't over. The locals in the towns around Olympic, they talk about old stories, something lurking in the woods. They call it the skin taker. Makes me wonder, was this the first time? Did it have that lumberjack skin before? And now does it have mine? I pulled into the campsite late, around 9 p.m. This whole Superstition Mountains trip was kind of a last-minute thing. To be honest, I just needed a change of scenery, you know? Some time away from the city and all its noise. Figured I'd spend a few nights out in the old RV, get my head straight, maybe do some hiking. Once I got leveled and killed the engine, I stepped out into the desert night. Man, it was still hot, even this late. You could practically taste the dust and dry brush in the air, carried on a faint breeze. And the stars. Forget about it. They littered the sky, way more than you ever see back home. Guess that's what they mean by light pollution. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, pulled up a camping chair, and just kicked back for a few minutes, soaking it all in. Heard some rustling nearby, probably a rabbit or some kind of lizard, the usual desert critters. Didn't think much of it. Solitude out here, it's good for the soul, you know. The next day, I went for a hike out in the foothills. It was a tough one, let me tell you. Sun was beating down, and those rocks were slippery as hell. I turned back after a few hours. Figured I'd tackle something shorter the next day. Back at the RV, I cleaned up, cooked something simple, and noticed my water supply was lower than expected. Must be a small leak somewhere. Annoying, but whatever. That desert sun can kill a man quick if he isn't careful. Night came quick. I ate outside under the stars again. Thought I heard something bigger this time, moving around in the bushes just out of sight. Probably a coyote trying its luck, scavenging for leftovers. Still, it was a bit unsettling out here all alone. Day 3, I decided to try a different hiking trail. Something shaded, something easier. Found a promising one about a 20 minute drive south, parked the RV and set out. The path cut through these narrow canyons with red rock walls all around. Kind of felt like a maze. I wasn't the only one out there though. Past a group of college kids giggling and taking selfies, and an older couple walking their golden retriever. Further in, the crowds thinned out, and the further I went, the more uneasy I felt. I know those canyons have a history, stories about lost treasure, disappearances, that kind of thing. But I tried to keep a level head, right? That's when I saw it. Well, at first I didn't see all of it. There was a flash of movement just as I turned a corner, this big, dark shape hunched over low to the ground. Whatever it was, it darted back as soon as it saw me. Now, I'm not the jumpy type, but my heart definitely skipped a beat. Figured it was a mountain lion or something. Better to give it space, I thought, and headed back to the main part of the trail. Seemed a little silly to be shaken up by some oversized desert cat, but whatever it was, it had me on edge. Still, it was a beautiful hike, and the sun felt good. Found a flat rock, sat down for a minute to catch my breath and drink some water. Guess that's the key, though, right? Water. As I'm sitting there, my skin starts to prickle. You know that feeling when you're being watched? I didn't even look up. I just knew something was there. Kept my eyes fixed on the rocks across the trail. After what seemed like an eternity, I risked a glance upwards, and there it was. Right above me, crouched on the canyon ledge, staring at me with these, well, I don't know how to describe the eyes. They weren't yellow or red like you see on TV. They gleamed in the sun like a bird's eyes, but huge. I couldn't make out a face. The thing was so hunched over, but it was big. It looked like a hunched, twisted person, only the limbs were too long, the torso too bulky. Just wrong. The angles were all off. It held still for a long moment. It wasn't a mountain lion. It wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. I don't know what I would have done if it jumped, tried to attack. All that went through my head was get out, get out, get out. I fumbled for my backpack and took off running. Stupid, I know. You never run from a mountain lion, but I was beyond caring. All logic had left my brain. I heard it behind me, heavy thuds on the trail, way faster than me. Glanced back, and it was bounding down the canyon wall, leaping from rock to rock, claws catching the stones. It was gaining fast. The clicking of its claws on the rock echoed through the canyon. I tripped, smacked my knee into a rock, felt a surge of pain, but hauled myself up and kept running. Burst from the canyon mouth, gasping for air, and scrambled towards the RV. Just had to get inside, lock the doors. It wouldn't break down a steel door, would it? As I fumbled for my keys, I glanced back, and it was just there. Right at the edge of the canyon. It didn't cross whatever invisible line it held in its mind. Just stood there staring, those dead bird eyes following me with an unnatural intensity. Its skin, I wish I hadn't seen its skin. Smooth, hairless, but textured like, well, I've never seen anything like it. I slammed the door of the RV, locked every bolt, and sunk to the floor. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I still had cell service, thank God. Called 911, even though I barely knew where I was. They said someone would be out soon. Suddenly, the RV lurched to one side. I heard this clanging on the roof, the whole thing shaking violently. Then this screeching, this inhuman screech that cut right through me. Thumping, like it was jumping on and off, trying to find a way in. I huddled on the floor, too scared to look up at the windows, half expecting claws to smash through the glass. I listened to the pounding on the roof for what seemed like hours. It eventually subsided, replaced by this dreadful scratching and clicking, like it was circling the RV, looking for another way in. My phone rang. It was the 911 dispatcher, saying the officers were almost there. Just a few more minutes out. They told me to stay hidden, stay quiet. Didn't need to tell me twice. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. I heard a thud, a sort of scrambling noise, then silence. Dead silence. Had it finally decided to leave? My knees were shaking as I inched towards the window, heart lodged in my throat. The clearing around the RV was empty. No sign of that thing. That's when I heard the sirens. A few minutes later, 2 police cars pulled in, lights flashing. I stumbled out of the RV, hands up, just wanting to be on the same side as those guns. The officers looked skeptical at my story at first. They checked out the roof, dents and gashes covered it. Couldn't explain that. Asked to search inside. While one officer went in the RV, the other questioned me. I told him everything, described it the best I could, those eyes, those long limbs, the way it moved. He jotted stuff down in a notepad, his face unreadable. Didn't say I was crazy, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. After a while, the officer came out of the RV. "Sir," he said, a strange tone in his voice. "There's something I need to ask you. You mentioned some water going missing." I nodded. "Leak or something," I mumbled. "Right," he continued, "but it's not a leak. Looks like whatever was up there, well, it looks like it drank your supply. We found empty bottles." I felt sick to my stomach. It didn't just attack, it had been stalking me, watching, waiting. My throat constricted. How much water was left? Hard to tell, maybe 2 liters. Why hadn't I checked earlier? My heart sank. That wasn't going to last long, especially not in this heat. The rest of that day was a blur. The officers didn't find any sign of the creature, no tracks beyond the trailhead. They took photos, did their thing, then left, telling me it wasn't safe to stay the night, and that they'd check back in the morning. I sat in the RV that night, running every possibility through my head. It was smart, clearly territorial. It didn't want to share its water, and now I'd invaded its space. It likely wouldn't let me leave. Could I drive through the dark, risk the unknown to get away? Or stay and wait for daylight, hoping for the best? In the end, I didn't get a choice. I woke at dawn to the sound of scratching on the roof again. It was back. The whole day was torture, like being under siege. It didn't attack, just circled, kept me trapped. I tried to ration the last of my supplies, but I knew it wouldn't last. By the second night, my mouth was like sandpaper, my head pounded with dehydration. That night, under the cover of darkness, I made my move. Had to try, packed the bare essentials, slipped out the driver's door. It didn't react immediately. Crouching low, I bolted for the trees. Heard that screech behind me, the sound of it taking off in pursuit. I sprinted through the darkness, stumbling over rocks, branches lashing my face. Somehow I managed to keep ahead. I could hear it crashing through the brush, getting closer. But the trees offered some cover. Then, luck struck. I tripped, fell headfirst into some kind of gulch. I tumbled down a slope, landed in a heap at the bottom. I heard that clicking sound circle the lip of the gulch, then it quieted. I was trapped, but for the moment, safe. Hours passed. The sun rose. I could feel the heat even down in that hole. Knew I didn't have long. Started to get dizzy. That's when I heard a different sound voices. Took them a while to find me. Rescuers. They lowered a rope, hauled me out, and rushed me to the nearest hospital. Took a few days there, on an IV drip, to feel normal again. The cops questioned me again, of course. Told them everything, even about the gulch. They searched, but found nothing, no trace of that creature. Said I likely hit my head in the fall. Hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe I did. Maybe it was just some sort of desert fever dream. Whatever it was, they call creatures like that skinwalkers around here. Old tales, they say, tell of them haunting the superstitions, hunting men. And they say they always thirst for water.